order for me? Were you able to do that?
We've begun the discussions of it. I think we could have it shortly, Your Honor. I have some proposals by the defense. I just want a few moments to reflect on it.
Okay. All right. So during a recess or something, I'd like you to at least give me something so that we can discuss it today. There are some discovery motions and then just some housekeeping matters. So I would like to get started right away. Is Dr. Russell here?
Yes, she is, Your Honor.
Okay. Oh, good morning, Doctor. Would you come on up to the witness stand, please?
For the record, pre-marked exhibits 1 through 32.
Thank you very much. I do. Good morning, Dr. Russell.
Good morning.
Okay, the defense is calling Dr. Russell as a witness. Jim, can I have the exhibits? Will counsel need the exhibits for examination of this witness, or can I have them with me and look at them?
Your Honor, whatever your preference is, we will abide by that. We may want to publish some at
Sure,
appropriate time.
that's no problem, but I can keep the notebook, that's not a problem?
Oh, yeah, that's intended for your use, Your Honor.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, go right ahead, counsel.
Your Honor, if I may, a couple of matters before Dr. Russell testify, with Your Honor's permission.
Okay.
One will take 15 seconds and the other will take maybe 3 minutes.
Okay, is it something that Dr. Russell can remain in the courtroom for?
It is.
Okay.
And
Sure.
if at any point I'm incorrect in that assumption, I'm sure you will tell me.
Okay.
First of all, the first order is I want to thank the court for granting my permission to practice before the court.
Okay.
And I'll strive to comport myself to honor the opportunity I've been given.
Thank you.
Secondly, with regard to the decision that Your Honor rendered with regard to our opposition to the motion, the reason I just wanted to raise that briefly is I wanted to make sure that I properly discharge my role in terms of a record. It won't be a long soliloquy, but I just wanted to point out to Your Honor the basis for why I am having this colloquy with the court.
Okay, is it in addition to what you have in your writings?
It is.
Or is it, okay, so that I'll let you talk about, but
Yeah, I'm not going to go into the substance of the writings.
Okay.
I understand Your Honor has decided in that regard.
okay.
So, and thank you, Your Honor. The first point is rooted in the Commonwealth versus Downs case, which is 31 Mass App Court 467, 1991. And the short of it for that case, which is toward the end of the case, which it was a matter very similar procedurally to this, where there was a request for reconsideration. The court took on that question of reconsideration, and what happened was the appellate court stated that it would be important, and I'm trying to discharge my duty as an officer of the court, but also for an advocate, to put on the record, right, the decision with the basis for the decision with regard to it.
Sure, I know, I have no problem with you doing this. You don't need to apologize for making a record. I have no problem with that.
Thank you. So I'll get right to it. So my request is, in accordance with Downs, that there be placed on the record some explanation for the decision. I would appreciate that. And then secondly, the second and last part of it is our expectation coming into the hearing is based on Commonwealth versus Addy, which is 79 Mass Appellate Court 835, 2011. And the short of that case, Your Honor, is it was a Daubert-Lanigan motion, very, very much similar to the procedural posture of this motion, where the court set a Daubert-Lanigan hearing. The party who was in support of the expert testimony then was given the opportunity to oppose the motion, and this is what the court said. The court stated that in response to the motion, the Commonwealth, and it was opposite because the Commonwealth was supporting the testimony, says in response to the motion, the Commonwealth submitted Trooper Sanford's collision reconstruction report. Then I'm going to skip down to the nub of it. At the motion hearing, after reading Trooper Sanford's report and listening to the arguments of counsel, the judge decided not to hold an evidentiary hearing and ruled that Trooper Sanford's opinion was admissible at trial because there was a factual basis for his opinion and it was therefore reliable. The reason I bring that up, Your Honor, is just to state what my expectation was and why I went in the manner that I did. And of course, Mr. McDermott was gracious enough to send an email that said, hey, if you want to change what the court expects the hearing to be, you need an affidavit and you need a motion, and that's what I did. So in conclusion, Your Honor, it is the position of the defense that the papers that we submitted, and I won't get into the argument,
Okay.
would obviate the need for an evidentiary hearing, much in the way that the Addy case obviated, where the party was given an opportunity to make the arguments in terms of the motion. So my main point in raising these two in conclusion is I would appreciate if Your Honor could state a basis for the denial of the, what I will call the Addy process, and we will of course respect Your Honor's decision and proceed in the manner Your Honor directs.
Okay. What do you say, who's going to argue this for the Commonwealth?
Hank Brennan for the Commonwealth. Your Honor, I believe you have the discretion to make the decision that a Lanigan hearing is appropriate. I didn't have the benefit, but Your Honor certainly had the benefit of a voir dire prior to trial. Your Honor had the benefit of watching the trial testimony. Your Honor had the benefit of appreciating that it wasn't Rule 14 that was complied with prior to that hearing. In fact, a report was provided nearly 2 days ago on December 10th. And that report, if the court has an opportunity to see it, is in conflict in many ways from the testimony at the voir dire, and it's in conflict with testimony at trial. One thing that is constant from the voir dire through the report that we received 2 days ago is that there is an absence of methodology. There is no basis in methodology to support the opinions that have been provided by this witness. And that fundamentally supports a decision that the defense should meet their burden, be compelled to provide a witness so that they can see if they can satisfy the Lanigan-Daubert standard. Thank you.
Okay. Go
Your
ahead,
Honor,
counsel.
he delved into the substance. I don't plan on belaboring it, but if I could just be heard.
Sure.
Thank you. Appreciate it. The methodology, and if we're going to go to the testimony, you will, of course, everyone will hear it firsthand, was established the first time. It's pattern recognition. It's well established in the law. And that was what Dr. Russell testified first trial. That's in her report. And as we're to proceed, that's what will happen. That's first. Your Honor, it was a rule, the trigger for the last time was a Rule 14. But Your Honor, in the June 20th transcript, on pages 59 and 62, said, on 59, Your Honor said, you, the Commonwealth, raised Daubert-type concerns. And on page 62, Your Honor said, I have to exercise my role as gatekeeper. So it was clear that it was Daubert. The methodology was established. So I just wanted to respond in that manner for clarity of the record.
Okay. Additionally, after I made the finding that I made, I heard trial testimony. So based on everything, in my discretion, we're having a hearing.
Understood,
Okay.
Your Honor.
There are your findings.
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Okay. All right. So you all set to go?
I am all set to go, Your
All right.
Honor.
Go right ahead, Mr. Lessie.
Thank you. Good morning, Dr. Russell.
Good morning.
And you'll keep your voice up. That would be helpful to all. Please state your name, your full name, and spell your last name.
Yes. Marie Russell, R-U-S-S-E-L, S-S-E-L-L.
Now, at a high level, what is your professional background?
I'm an emergency physician.
And do you have anything else in terms of your professional background in addition to being an emergency room physician?
Yes, I'm also a trained forensic pathologist.
Your Honor, may I interrupt for 1 second? I'm sorry.
Sure.
Can I have a moment, Your Honor? Counsel? Thank you. Thank you for that, Your Honor.
Well, go right ahead.
How long have you been an emergency room physician?
I've been an emergency department physician since 1987, so that is over 30 years.
How long have you been a forensic pathologist?
I've been a forensic pathologist for about 31 years.
So you've been an emergency room physician and a fellowship-trained forensic pathologist, both of those for 30-plus years.
Correct.
Do you have a medical license?
Yes.
When were you first licensed to practice medicine?
In 1988 in California.
And what licenses do you currently hold?
I hold medical licenses in California, New York, Idaho, Massachusetts.
And in California, what are you technically licensed? What is the documentation of the license you had? Your license as a what?
Physician and surgeon in California.
A physician and surgeon, did you say?
Correct.
Your Honor, as I'm sure you know, but I want to make sure I get your protocol correctly, we've pre-marked, Mr. Brennan and I have agreed to the exhibits. We've agreed to both the pre-marking and to the admissibility of each exhibit. And I can never either tell you how I understand I'm to go, or Your Honor can state it.
So these are in evidence?
Yes.
So use them as if they're in evidence?
Thank you, appreciate that. May I approach the
Yes.
witness? Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Russell, I have handed you, which is in evidence as Exhibit 1. Do you recognize Exhibit 1?
Yes, I do,
How do you recognize it?
because I wrote it.
And what is Exhibit 1?
This is my curriculum vitae.
And is that your updated curriculum vitae?
Yes, it is.
It's the most recent one.
Yes.
I now want to get into your educational background with a little bit of sprinkling of experience going into it. Where did you go to college?
I went to college at MIT and Northeastern University.
Approximately when did you attend Massachusetts Institution of Technology?
From 1972 to 1974.
And what did you study at MIT?
I took pre-med courses.
Did you obtain a degree from MIT?
No,
Why not?
because my mother got sick. She developed cancer, and I went back to New York.
And after that experience, did you go back to college?
Yes,
Where did you go?
Northeastern University.
And what years did you attend Northeastern University?
Part-time from 1974 to 1981.
And did you obtain a degree from Northeastern University?
Yes,
And what degree was that?
that was a Bachelor of Science degree with highest honors.
After college, did you go on to receive a Doctor of Medicine?
Yes,
Where?
at the University of Massachusetts in Worcester,
When?
1987.
Now let's go into residencies, internships, and fellowships. Did you complete any residencies?
Yes,
What residencies did you complete?
I completed a residency in emergency medicine, followed by a residency in anatomic pathology.
What is anatomic pathology?
Anatomic pathology is the study. It's a division of pathology. It's a subset of pathology, and it's a division that deals with diseases that can be diagnosed by looking at tissues and bodily fluids.
And what is emergency medicine? Although most all of us have that experience, if you just briefly describe what emergency medicine is.
Well, emergency medicine is the field of medicine that deals with acute injuries and injuries of people.
In terms of the residencies, briefly describe what was involved. What did you do in those residencies? And let's start out with emergency medicine.
Emergency medicine was a very intense residency. It was a combined internship and residency that lasted for 4 years, and I was at one of the busiest trauma centers in the United States. We would routinely see patients in the emergency room, and some months we rotated outside the emergency room to various subspecialty clinics and areas like the ICU, for instance. In the emergency medicine department, we worked all different shifts. We saw numerous patients because it was a very busy facility, and we saw anything that ranged from gunshot wounds, stab wounds, beatings, down to runny noses.
And where was specifically those residencies? What facility? What is the name of it?
It was at the Los Angeles County USC Medical Center, which people formerly knew as the General Hospital, the 19-story General Hospital from Los Angeles.
And did that have a certain level designation with regard to the type of trauma that would come to those facilities?
Yes, it's a level 1 trauma center, which is the highest level that can be achieved.
And in terms of the residencies, in terms of anatomic pathology, where was that residency? Which facility?
That was at the same facility.
And how many years was the residency of anatomic pathology?
That was 2 years.
And how many years for emergency medicine?
Combined with the internship, it was 4 years.
Did you complete any fellowships?
Yes.
What fellowships?
I completed a fellowship in forensic pathology.
What is a fellowship compared to, say, an internship and a residency?
Generally, it's a higher level. A fellowship is completed or done or undertaken after someone completes a residency.
What did you do in your fellowship?
Oh, in forensic pathology?
Yes.
Did autopsies. So it was a very organized training program, which included 1 to 2 autopsies a day, mostly 2, and as well as lectures, seminars, interesting case conferences, many things. During that time, I was sent to the FBI for a specific case series. So it was very intense. And in terms of the autopsies, I autopsied cases that were gunshot wounds, stab wounds, many homicides, many homicides, accident victims, car accidents, people hit by cars, people stabbed, child abuse, a wide range. And the goal was to give the fellows the widest range of experiences.
And can you estimate how many autopsies you performed during your fellowship?
Oh, I know for a fact that I performed over 500.
And that was over a 2-year period?
Correct.
So you're performing then an autopsy almost every other day, is that
Oh, no,
right?
1 to 2 autopsies a day.
1 to 2 a day.
Yes.
And what at its core are you doing in terms of an autopsy as a forensic pathologist?
You know, the autopsy is just part of what the forensic pathologist does, which is death investigation. So a forensic pathologist looks at a person's, well, just the body is one part of it. The external exam, sometimes, some cases, not all cases, get an autopsy, actually, that go to the medical examiner's office. But there's a death investigation, which involves a detailed external examination, plus an examination of the circumstances of how the decedent was found, interviews with police officers and others when appropriate, interviews with their doctors, and examination photos if available.
Earlier in your testimony, you said you have over 30 years of experience as a forensic pathologist. When was the last time you engaged in the practice of medicine pertaining to forensic pathology?
This year.
And have you had a continuous or non-continuous practice in forensic pathology?
Continuous.
And we're going to get to that later on as appropriate. Not as appropriate, we're going to get to it later on. Do you have any affiliations with professional organizations?
Yes.
Can you name them?
Yes, I am a fellow of the American Academy of Forensic Science.
What do you need to do to become a fellow of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences?
Well, you have to be a member for a certain number of years, a minimum number of years, and attend a certain number of their annual meetings. And it helps if you've given presentations at the annual meetings.
What other professional organizations are you a member of?
I'm also a member of the National Association of Medical Examiners.
Are you a member or a fellow?
I'm actually a fellow.
What do you need to do to be a fellow of the National Association of Medical Examiners?
It's very similar. Be a
Similar
member
to-
for a certain number of years, and they usually ask that you've given at least one presentation.
What other professional organizations are you a member of?
Okay, so I've been a former member of the American Academy of Emergency Physicians, a former fellow, actually. I'm a member of the California Homicide Investigators Association and the California Sexual Assault Investigators Association.
Now let's move to trainings. Do you have any specialized trainings?
Lots of specialized training.
Please name them.
Okay. Well, I have specialized training in both emergency medicine-related fields and forensic pathology-related fields. Would you like me to name both?
Well, maybe eventually, but I'm going to try to shorten this a little bit. Give me an example of the type of investigations, apropos to why we're here today, that you would have had specialized trainings for.
Well, I attended a 2-week program in crime scene investigation. I've attended and completed programs in forensic photography, bomb investigation, hit and run accident investigation as well.
Yeah. Dr. Russell, if you need to access your report, do it, but I would prefer that unless you need to, we just have a question and answer. You don't
So I can't see whether Dr. Russell's reading from
I'm sorry, you
her.
can't-
I
you
can't see.
cannot.
Do you have your CV in front of you?
I do.
All right, so what's typical, counsel, is it will remain closed. If she needs to refer to it, you just ask, and of course, I'll let her
That's what
refer.
I understood, yes.
So is that, you have it open in front of you?
It's right here.
Okay, so counsel, why don't you?
I will.
Why don't you leave it there turned over, Dr. Russell?
Oh, okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Your
I
Honor.
can't see from up here whether she was reading or not.
I had that sense, that's why I mentioned it.
I
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Do you have any specialized training beyond your experience as emergency room physician or forensic pathology in motor vehicle accident investigation?
Yes.
Describe that, please.
Yes, I took a several-day course here in Massachusetts on hit-and-run accident investigation.
And we're going to get into this a little bit more, but did you also have experience with motor vehicle accident diagnosis and treatment of humans in the emergency room?
Oh, yes, yes.
We'll get into more of that detail. As a forensic pathologist for 30-plus years, did you see decedents and living patients who had been the subject of motor vehicle accidents?
Many.
And in terms of forensic pathology, are patients always deceased, or does the field of forensic pathology also address living persons?
Yes, the field of forensic pathology as a broad field, yes, can deal with living people. Some government offices will choose to restrict their involvement to deceased people only, but it's a broad field. It does involve living people too.
Now let's move to expert witness experience in courtrooms. You understand what I mean by the terminology expert witness?
Yes.
What jurisdictions have you testified in as an expert witness?
Well, California, Florida, Illinois, Arizona, and the state of Washington.
What topics in that expert testimony did you testify to?
Both emergency medicine and forensic pathology.
So you testified as an expert witness in those cases in both emergency medicine and forensic pathology?
Correct.
And you were qualified as an expert in each one of those categories, correct?
Yes.
Was your opinion ever excluded, your expert witness opinion ever excluded in any of those court cases?
Never.
Let's now move to work experience. What do you currently do for work?
Well, right now, I am reviewing cases, reviewing medical legal cases. I attend conferences, and I've kept up my board certification status. It's a lot of work to keep up your board certification status.
Understood. In terms of other work, do you do work for any boards in any state?
Yes, the Medical Board of Massachusetts.
And what type of...
Excuse me, Medical Board of California.
Right. And what is your title with respect to the Medical Board of California?
Medical consultant.
And describe specifically, you don't have to go into detail, but just describe what it is, the types of things you do for the medical board, and I assume that's in furtherance of practicing medicine. Is that consultancy the practice of medicine in California?
Oh, absolutely. You can't be a medical consultant for the medical board without a medical license. It is the practice of medicine.
Give us some examples of what your practice of medicine is with respect to the Medical Board of California.
For the medical board, I review cases. So the cases are referred to the medical board because of concerns that a licensed physician in the state of California is either practicing outside the law or practicing below the standard of care, or a combination of those things. So the cases are referred to the medical board, and I am one of the people that reviews the cases and makes recommendations as to whether there is actually a concern.
So, going back to my clinical pharmacy days, I believe I understand the standard of care parlance, but we have maybe some different parlance in the medical field. Is standard of care and whether a physician's met it also known as physician negligence?
Yes, if they don't meet the standard of care, it's
Yes.
considered physician negligence, yes.
Describe your role in cases briefly of your expert witness, the topics in forensic medical investigations?
The topics actually range from homicide. I've been involved with several homicide cases. Homicide, often stab wounds, blunt force trauma, child abuse are the topics. And domestic violence is also another frequent topic.
Prior to your current role that you've just described as an expert witness and a medical consultant for the Medical Board of California, I want to go back just a little bit to the expert witness. Are you able to state whether you have testified previously mostly for prosecution or defense? Do you have a sense as to where the majority of your testimony has been on whose behalf?
Well, it's been mixed. There's been a lot of prosecution cases.
So you've testified as an expert witness many times in support of the prosecution.
Yes.
And has your testimony in support of the prosecution been only as a physician, or was there times when you, before you became a physician, that you were testifying on behalf of the prosecution, say when you were a police officer?
Yes.
And roughly, how many cases, we're going to get more into your police officer experience, but how many roughly cases do you recall testifying on behalf of the prosecution as a police officer?
25 to 30.
Now let's go to just prior to your immediate role. Before being a medical consultant for the Medical Board of California, where did you work?
Immediately before I worked at the state of California prison system. It's called the the Corrections Department in the state of California, and I was the chief medical executive for one of the major prisons.
What years approximately did you serve in that role as chief medical executive of the California State Prison at Corcoran?
Yes, from 2018 from 2018 to 2023.
What was your role? What did you do?
Oh. Well, the chief medical executive is in charge of the whole medical department, and so in that role I had a lot of duties, including supervising the medical care of all of the patients, the inmates, conducting various committees. I chaired many committees, process improvement, pharmacy therapeutics, death committee. I investigated every single death that occurred at the prison during that time period.
Let's stop there if we could, please.
Yes.
And talk about from 2018 to 2020 is what I heard you say was your time period. Describe what was a death review at Corcoran that you performed.
Yes. The death review at Corcoran was quite extensive. And so what would happen, well, first of all, let me give you background. Background is that patients die from a variety of causes in the prison system, including suicide, homicide, natural death, overdoses, a wide variety of reasons people die. So my job was to investigate those deaths. And the way I did that was when these inmates or patients were taken to the emergency area, when they were found unresponsive, taken to the emergency area, if I was there, in the building, that's where my office was, I would go and personally examine these patients from head to toe.
In that personal examination from head to toe, did you ever experience any patients with wounds?
Yes.
Describe some of the wounds that you experienced that were the subject of your death review.
Well, there were a variety of wounds, and some of the most common ones were stab wounds, or blunt force trauma wounds, contusions, or commonly known as bruises. But if it was, for instance, a hanging patient, I would look at the wounds around the neck to see if the ligature mark was horizontal or had a vertical component, because that could differentiate the manner of death or the mode of death.
You have to ever, in this process, have to determine whether a wound well, let me back up. Are you familiar with the term defensive wound?
Yes.
What does that term mean in the field of medicine?
Well, typically, what that means is that the victim of an assault attempted to defend themselves during the assault. And one of the common ways they do that is they bring up their arms to protect their face, neck, chest area, head area from the assault. So defensive wounds are commonly seen in the arm, the forearm, the posterior portion of the forearm, or the hands also.
Did you ever have to determine whether a wound was defensive when either the patient was unresponsive or the patient was deceased?
Many times.
Is it many times for both, or is it many times for one of those two?
Well, definitely when the patient was deceased.
So let's stop there. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Let's start. So many times, do you have an approximate number of how many times just at your 5 years at Corcoran you determined whether a wound was a defensive wound on a deceased patient, approximately?
Not very many.
Okay.
Counsel, could we get an answer as to how many death reviews total were done while she?
Yes, Your Honor. I will ask that question right now. How many death reviews did you perform? And if you want to do it based upon per year, average month, whatever gives the court the best, most accurate answer.
Okay. Well, on average, we had one death per month. So some of those occurred at nighttime. But I reviewed all the cases, but he didn't personally examine every single case.
Right.
Over 35 got a very intensive exam.
So if I did my math correctly, it's 60, right? It's 12 times 5. You were there 5 years?
For death reviews,
For death
yes.
reviews, and that was the court's question.
Yes.
Right. Was there anybody else at Corcoran doing death reviews?
There was a committee that I formed to review deaths. It didn't exist when I first got there, but it did get formed later on.
Were there any other physicians on the committee that... so you were the only physician on the committee in Corcoran that was performing the death reviews, or not?
No, I misspoke. There was one other physician, the person who was my assistant, who also needed to be involved in those death reviews in case I wasn't around.
Did you ever need to consult with any medical examiner's office in connection with your death reviews at Corcoran?
I frequently consulted with the local Kings County Medical Examiner's Office.
Describe examples of that consultation and interaction.
Okay. So I would conduct my initial part of the review, and I would call, on some cases, not every single case, but on some cases, call the Kings County Medical Examiner's Office and speak to them to alert them to certain findings or certain things that I wanted them to specifically look for in their examination.
Did that consultation include any consultation regarding wounds and the source and nature of the wounds?
I don't recall.
Now let's go to your emergency medicine physician experience at LAC plus USC. Do you have a shorthand that you'd like to use so I don't have to say that every time?
I don't.
All right. So I'll just say LAUSC. Would that be something that would work?
I say LAC USC.
I'll say LAC USC also. So what years were you an emergency medicine physician at LAC USC?
I was there as an emergency intern, resident, and physician from 1987 to 2016.
So if, again, I did my math right, it's about 29 years?
Yes.
And you've described previously that that facility was a level 1 trauma center, correct?
Yes, it was.
What is a level 1 trauma center?
A level 1 trauma center is the highest level that the trauma center could be. So it means it has in-house neurosurgeon, in-house orthopedic surgeon, an active research program, and obviously in-house trauma surgeons.
What did you do as an emergency medicine physician at that facility from 1987 to 2016? I'm sure it's a lot, but if you could give some representative examples.
Well, we staffed both the major and minor areas of the emergency department where the patients were brought into. So any patient that was brought in with major trauma or, even non-trauma, medical condition, heart attack or stroke, would be brought into the emergency department, and we would provide the initial examination, screening, resuscitation, whatever was needed. And then if the patient needed to go to the operating room, we would call the surgeons. And, if they needed to go to the ICU, we would stabilize them and send them to the ICU.
In addition to diagnosing and treating that we've all experienced with the unfortunate, with all respect, having to go to the emergency medicine department, did you engage in any surgery in the emergency medicine department? And if you could describe what you mean if the answer is yes.
Yes.
Describe what it is that you did that constituted surgery at the emergency medicine department from 1987 to 2016. We're going to get into more specifics apropos to the issue at case here, but just looking for what, when we say that you did surgery, want to give an idea of what that is.
Okay, so we did what is considered minor surgery. We sewed up, we debrided and sewed up lacerations, repaired lacerations. We incised certain infected wounds and cut them open. So is that what you mean?
Yes, thank you. So now moving, and we're going to come back to some of that, but now moving on to the next position that you had at the LAC USC Jail Medical Services. Can you describe what the name of that position was?
Yes, I was jail medical director.
And approximately what time period were you jail medical director at LAC USC?
Okay, before I answer that, I'd like to say that in addition, so we generally had a clinical role and an administrative role. So there were several things going on at the same time. In terms of jail medical director, as the administrative role, I was doing that from 2003 to 2014.
And can you describe the in-custody unit that was there that you provided this role that you just described?
Yes, we had an unusual situation where we had, in addition to the regular major emergency department, we also had a specially dedicated emergency, combination of emergency, inpatient, and outpatient area for patients that were incarcerated. So the patients would be brought directly up to the jail emergency department for their injuries if they were hemodynamically stable. What I mean by that is if their blood pressure and pulse were stable, they'd be brought directly up to the emergency department.
And
Jail.
what type of agencies would bring those types of patients to that department?
The Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, Los Angeles Police Department, the California Highway Patrol, local area, any of the local police departments in LA County were eligible to bring their patients there.
And briefly describe the volume of patients that would be brought into that department.
It was very busy. Just the emergency department alone was 20 to 30 patients a day, just for the jail emergency department. And then the inpatient area depended on the year, because it was about 40 patients, inpatients, and over the years that decreased a little bit.
Did you ever have a role with regard to emergency medicine quality improvement at LAC-USC?
Yes, I was chairman of the committee for a period of time.
And do you remember approximately when that was?
I'd have to refer to the CV, sorry.
Would around 2000 to 2003 be approximately an accurate time?
Yes.
What did you do as the Director of Emergency Medicine Quality Improvement?
So for that role, I was in charge of quality improvement projects and how they were progressing, during the interim, as well as I investigated all the deaths in the main emergency department and the jail emergency department.
Now, the title has in it quality improvement.
Yes.
Am I correct that in order to be a director of quality improvement, you have to understand well the underlying practice to understand what needs to be improved?
Yes.
And did you believe that you had that high level of understanding?
Yes.
And did you exercise that high level of understanding in that role?
Yes.
Now, before that, did you have any experience with life support training at LAC-USC?
Yes, I was the director of the Life Support Training Center.
And was that also around late 1990s, 2000 time period?
Yes.
And what was your role, what did you do as Director of Center for Life Support and Training at LAC-USC?
So we provided all of the life support courses that were taught at the institution, including advanced cardiac life support, advanced trauma life support, which was taught to the surgeons and emergency physicians, and pediatric life support.
Now we're going to switch gears a little bit. Have you ever been an adjunct professor?
Yes.
When and where?
From, I believe the dates were 1998 to 2003 at the California State University at Los Angeles.
And what did you teach at Cal State Los Angeles?
I taught a graduate level course called Legal Medicine, which was part of their master's degree program.
And that's a graduate program, correct?
Yes.
And what were the students in the grad program there for? Was there a certain title that they were referred to as?
Yes, it was a graduate program in criminalistics, and so many of them were crime lab employees or headed to work at a crime lab. And
just briefly, can you give just examples of some of the topics you taught to those that were in this criminalistics program?
Yes. So I was teaching the medical course, and so I had to teach a wide range of topics about forensic medicine to these people who would be going to crime scenes and seeing deceased bodies, etc. So my topics included things like time of death, blunt force trauma, sharp force trauma, burns, wounds. I did teach about wounds and including, so a wide variety of wounds.
Let's focus in on wounds.
Okay.
Describe in some detail the type of wound analysis and treatment you taught as an adjunct professor at Cal State Los Angeles.
Well, there was no treatment taught to those students, as opposed to the emergency students, emergency medicine doctors. But the types of wounds that I talked about in the legal medicine course included, again, sharp force, blunt force, thermal. I talked about bite wounds in terms of identifying bite wounds on a deceased body. I talked about wounds that people would see in child abuse, domestic violence, elder abuse.
And in your teaching, let's break that down. In your teaching of dog, is it fair to say dog-inflicted human wounds? Is that a fair term? Or would
Well,
what would you use?
mostly bite wounds in general.
Bite wounds, was that bite wounds from a specific animal or general animals?
No, mostly human. I talked about mostly human bite wounds.
Okay.
With a reference to animal wounds.
And what was the reference to animal wounds?
Just how they can be differentiated from human bite wounds.
So you taught human bite wounds, but you also taught how to differentiate human bite wounds from dog bite wounds on humans.
Yes.
I move to strike that.
So let the witness answer that, so ask it in a non-leading way, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Describe what you taught the students on the topic of human wounds and dog bite wounds.
Okay. I taught the students to recognize human bite wounds. So I had pictures, images, and slides on human bite wounds, why they would be important, the forensic value of bite wounds. I mentioned how they may differ from other bite wounds, such as dog bite wounds. In the emergency department, the focus was a little different.
That's what I wanted to go to next. So describe, well, first, in your many years in the emergency department, and we're going to get to this in more detail, so why don't we just save it until the next category we get to. We'll come back to that. Before you were an adjunct professor at Cal State Los Angeles, and before you were a medical doctor, what did you do for work?
I was a police officer full-time.
And approximately when were you a full-time police officer?
From 1977 to 1984 in Massachusetts.
When you started on the police force in Malden, how many women were on the police force?
Before I started, none.
So you were the first woman on the police force in Malden.
Correct.
Did you go to academy?
Yes.
Did you graduate successfully from academy?
From the Boston Police Academy, yes.
Before that, did you have any other work experience?
Yes, I worked in an emergency room, actually.
Right, but in terms of from the time period, as I understand it, in Malden, if I heard correctly, you said approximately 1997 to 1984 for?
77.
I'm sorry, 77, right. So before that, did you have any other job in the community in Malden?
Well, in the period 1974 to 1977, during that period of time, I worked in the emergency department. I was an EMT, and I was an auxiliary police officer.
Let's talk about the EMT experience. What did you do as an EMT?
I did volunteer work in an ambulance.
And just, again, most of us know what an EMT does, but just for the record, just briefly, what did you do as an EMT?
Generally rendered first aid to calls for emergency service.
Now let's go into the category of your medical training and experience specifically pointed at a certain topic. With regard to wounds, do you have any experience with dog-inflicted wounds on humans?
Much experience.
Let's start and do this chronologically. What professional experience have you had with, we'll call them dog bites? What would you like to call them? Dog bites or dog bite wounds? What's your parlance?
Dog bite wounds.
So what's your professional experience going chronologically with dog bite wounds? Your first.
Well, my first experience that I recall was during that period of 1975 to 1977, when I attended a training session where I witnessed the training of guard dogs. The training was conducted by some people I know, and I was invited to this professional session. And during that session, even though the simulated criminals were wearing specially designed sleeves on their arms, one of the participants was accidentally bitten by one of the dogs.
And when you say accidentally bitten, what do you mean accidentally? Did the dog have a full bite grip or less than a full bite grip?
You know, I can't really say because I don't remember if I actually saw that bite, but the dogs were being taught how to aggressively bite and hold on to the simulated criminals, and apparently this one bite went out of the range of where the sleeve ended.
And this was back in the 1970s.
Mid-70s, yes.
Did you provide any care for the wound of the person that was subjected to that dog injury?
Yes, I was an EMT, so I provided basic first aid and transported that person to local emergency room.
So you provided treatment on the spot, and then you participated in the transport to the ER?
Yes,
And did you get an opportunity at that point to observe the wound that was caused by this dog bite?
very closely.
And because you treated it, correct?
Correct.
Let's now move to the LACUSC Jail Emergency Department. And I recall you testify that was approximately 1987 to 1995. Do I have that right?
That was part. Yeah, that was the intense part that where we saw a lot of law enforcement dog bites.
What, did you see any dog bite wounds in that jail emergency department?
Many.
When you say many, can you give, not how much you treated, but just how many of those dog-induced wounds that you observed?
I would say about 60 to 70 cases that I personally observed. There could have been a lot more.
Now, what type of dogs, well, let me strike that. As part of that treatment, did you learn what type of dog inflicted the wound?
Well, these were trained law enforcement dogs.
So these were canine dogs, right?
Yes.
And is canine bites an appropriate term to describe them?
Yes.
And how many of these individuals at LAUSC Jail Emergency Department did you personally treat with these canine-induced dog wounds?
Personally, about 40.
And you're saying personally, did you have any other experience in addition to those 40 that was not personal treatment with dog wounds?
Yes, so we worked.
Describe what those additional roles were.
We worked as a team, and so sometimes one intern or one resident would get the case, and another time the other person on the team would get the case. So, but we worked as a team. We saw all the wounds together, as a team, and so that's why it's hard to give it a hard number.
What was your role as a member of that team when you were not personally treating the wound? What was your role? What did you do?
I would assist, I would see other patients, but we all rounded on all the cases.
What do you mean by rounding?
Rounding is this medical phenomenon where the team of doctors and sometimes other healthcare professionals go from bed to bed and discuss each case.
So you went, in addition to the 40, you went as a member of the team from bed to bed to bed, and in addition to those 40 of dog-inflicted wounds, you saw additional dog-inflicted wounds, correct?
Yes.
Describe the level of bites that you would observe both as personally treating and as a member of the team.
Well, these bites were unlike anything I'd seen before. They were very extensive dog bites with a lot of tissue damage. And there were areas on the patients where the dog would attempt more than one bite. And sometimes there were, completed bites, and sometimes there were what I called partial bites, where there were just some scratches, abrasions, superficial wounds. But so it was quite a different thing than I had read about in textbooks.
What do you mean by partial bites?
Well, a partial bite would be where the dog did not get a full grip on the victim and therefore did not penetrate the skin. The teeth actually slide around, along the surface of the skin in the attempt to get a grip.
Could you make that determination, that partial grip, as you've described it, from looking at the wound?
Yes.
And how, in this specific experience at the USC jail, did you determine, generally, that the dog had made a partial grip on whatever was the body part that was the subject of the wound?
Well, oftentimes because they were accompanied by completed dog bites that had full penetration, puncture wounds, and tearing.
Right, and so did you make the observation of the wound? In other words, you saw it and then reached a medical conclusion about whether it was partial or complete?
Yes.
And approximately how many times did you look at the wound and make a medical determination with regard to whether it was a partial or a complete grip by the dog?
I don't really know because we focused in on the most dangerous of the wounds, the ones that had the large gaping lacerations and that needed the medical attention.
So the predominance was the typical canine bite, but then there were also a less number with the incomplete bite, correct?
Yes.
Does an incomplete bite have what you observed, have any relationship to a civilian dog bite?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
It wasn't a great question. So let's go to, does a canine bite ever present as a regular community dog bite in terms of the wound?
Ever?
Yes.
A trained canine bite?
Yes.
I haven't seen it.
Right. So an incomplete canine bite, correct, is more tethered to a canine. I'll rephrase. Describe how you would compare an incomplete canine dog bite to a civilian dog bite.
Well, that's difficult. And again, I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay, well, let's just conclude this way. So the predominance at the LA USC Jail Emergency Department was canine dog bites. Let me rephrase it. We'll in terms of LAUSC Jail Emergency Department, what was the predominant type of dog-inflicted wound that you observed and treated?
The regular emergency department?
Yes.
Not jail. The predominant was civilian dog bites.
Now let's move to the emergency department at LAUSC, and specifically your role as an emergency department physician. And as I understand it, you've testified that was between 1987 and about 2016 as an intern resident and physician. Is that your testimony?
And yes,
Now, did you treat and assess dog bites or dog wounds in that capacity in the emergency department of LACUSC?
in the main emergency department, yes.
In the main emergency department. And did you also treat, beyond dog-induced wounds, general animal-induced wounds that were not from a dog?
Yes.
Describe some of the animal wounds, non-dog animal wounds that you would observe and treat in the regular emergency department.
Well, the most common one was the cat. But beyond that, we would see wounds from skunks, rats, raccoons. I recall seeing an opossum wound one time, and of course, snake bites and, various other animals.
Approximately how many dog bite wounds did you observe and treat in the emergency department at LACUSC?
So the main emergency department,
Yes.
well, over the course of all those years, at least 500.
How do you come up with the number 500?
Well, it was an estimate based on seeing, based on the number of years I worked, plus the number of weeks in a year, plus the number of dog bites that I saw per year, per week. And that's how I came up with that number. And I underestimated.
Describe what you did, just briefly, with regard to the wounds. What type of practice of medicine, what did you do specifically with the wounds?
So when a patient came in with a wound,
And I'm talking dog bite wounds.
okay, well, first I had to figure out if it was a dog bite, because some patients couldn't tell us what kind of animal bit them. Most of the time they could, but some couldn't. Some were young, some, there were various reasons. There was sometimes language barriers. So I had to figure out what a type of animal inflicted the wound. And there was a very important clinical reason for that.
We're going to get to that.
Okay.
So I think you testified earlier about specifically what you did with the wound. What did you do specifically with the dog, these 500, approximately more than 500 dog-inflicted wounds? What did you do specifically, so to speak, with your hands?
Okay. Well, I was clearly interested in wounds, and particularly bite wounds. I was very interested in this, so it got my attention all the time. And so what I would first do, I had to do a differential diagnosis, but physically, if I determined it was a dog bite wound, then I'd render the appropriate treatment. Sometimes there was perforation of the skin and lacerations, and those lacerations sometimes needed debridement, which is cutting away from the edges and the dead tissue, any devitalized tissue, and some were large enough that they actually needed suturing. Many of them needed antibiotics prescribed.
In terms of the facility, I think you've testified that it was a level 1 trauma center?
Yes.
Did the fact that it was a level 1 trauma center have any effect on the number of dog bite wounds you would see?
I don't know the exact effect, but we did get referrals in.
And does the fact that it was a level trauma 1 center mean your estimate was conservative or liberal?
Oh, my estimate was conservative.
Meaning conservative, you say 500, but describe what you mean by conservative.
Conservative
Up or
means,
does it go down?
oh, I probably saw a lot more than 500.
Does that estimate include the number of dog-inflicted wounds that you supervised?
No.
So in addition to the 500 plus, you also supervised. Describe what the nature of the supervision was with respect to dog-inflicted wounds.
Well, as an attending physician at a university medical center, of course, I supervised interns, other residents, medical students, PAs, and nurse practitioners. And so frequently had, 3 to 5 people working with me that I had to supervise. So I would see I saw any case that they saw. Any patient that they saw, I would supervise. And when there were wounds, I would look at the wounds personally myself.
How many trainees did you typically supervise per shift?
Typically 3 to 5.
So in addition to the 500 plus, you were supervising 3 to 5 trainees per shift who also were treating dog-inflicted wounds?
Yes.
And can you give an approximate number of dog-inflicted wounds, just approximate, that those trainees would be experiencing in their role?
It's so hard to give an estimate. But with all those trainees and all those weeks and years, I would say at least another 500.
Have you ever participated, now we're going to switch gears to when you described you were a forensic pathologist, an R. Did you ever have experience with an autopsy which regarded a canine attack?
Yes, unfortunately.
When?
It was in 1995.
And where?
It was in Los Angeles.
And where specifically, which department in Los Angeles?
Oh, when I was at the coroner's office, I was assigned an autopsy.
So this was at the medical examiner's office?
That's correct, medical examiner now.
And what was the subject of the autopsy? Who was the subject?
It was a young boy, I don't remember the exact age, and he was killed by 3 dogs when he entered into a fenced area.
Were they canine dogs or civilian dogs?
I don't know the exact training, but I was led to believe that they were not law enforcement canine dogs.
So you were led to believe there were civilian dogs? Not, they just weren't canine dogs?
They weren't, as far as I know, they were not trained canine dogs. They were civilian dogs.
Did you observe any wound patterns as part of that autopsy?
Yes,
Describe the wound patterns that you observed.
I'll never forget them. There were many deep lacerations, avulsions. There was a wide range of wounds, and amongst them there were patterns of abrasions, multiple parallel abrasions.
Were there any other types of marks from the part of the dog that you observed?
Oh, there were puncture wounds.
Any other types of wounds? Any other part of the dog?
Well, I believe that there were some claw marks. They also would look like superficial abrasions.
And were there any bite marks?
Oh, yes.
How many? Approximately.
I don't know.
More than
There were-
one?
Oh, many.
Many. Now let's move to studies and publications. Have you ever performed a study of canine dog bite injuries?
Yes.
Describe it.
Yes, my colleagues and I performed a study of over 700 canine dog bites that presented to the jail emergency department over a 10-year period.
When approximately was this study?
In the in the 1990s.
Did that study result in any publications?
Yes, 2.
Were those 2 publications peer-reviewed?
Yes.
What does peer review mean?
That means that a group of physicians from the same specialty have read the article, analyzed the methodology, and determined that this was a valid study.
Have you, in addition to that study that was supposed to be peer-reviewed, have you ever edited any publications?
Yes.
Describe the publications that you edited.
I edited a 2-volume publication called Topics of Emergency Medicine, Forensic Emergency Medicine.
And were there any chapters in that regarding human bite wounds?
Yes.
Describe briefly what the chapter was about.
Yes, the chapter was written by Dr. Gerald Vale, who was a pioneer, and one of his colleagues, Dr. Anselmo, who were pioneers in the field of forensic odontology, bite wound analysis.
Now, you mentioned Dr. Gerald Vale. What is his profession or professions?
Okay, he was a dentist and a teaching dentist at the University of Southern California, and an attorney as well.
How was he? Are you aware of his reputation?
Oh yes,
How
even
was he
before
regarded?
I got to this.
What was his reputation?
Sustain this.
What was his reputation?
No, we're
Okay.
going to move on to a different question. What do you remember the title of the publication?
Excuse me.
The title of the publication again?
Yes. It was called Topics of Emergency Medicine, Forensic Emergency Medicine.
Okay. What part of that publication did you edit specifically?
Myself and my co-editor edited the entire publication, every chapter in the publication.
Did that publication discuss human dentition?
Yes, the chapter written by Dr. Vale and colleague did.
Did that publication discuss dog dentition?
Yes.
And you, of course, since you edited the whole publication, you were editing, well, let me ask this. Did you edit parts of the publication on human and dog dentition?
Yes.
What did you do as an editor of those chapters?
Well, I read the chapters thoroughly and looked looked for any inconsistencies or any problems with the topics, and then and made some small recommendations, and then it went on for publication.
Do you know why you were asked to edit that publication?
Yeah, that's sustained.
In terms of the publication after editing, was the publication peer reviewed?
Yes.
And were you part of that peer review process?
No, because I was the editor.
Correct. So you were the editor, and then after your editing, it went on for peer review?
Yes.
And then did it sort of pass, so to speak, the peer review?
Yes.
And then it became published?
Yes.
Let's now move on to the topic of publications, seminars, talks, lectures. How many peer-reviewed, well, let me start this way. Have you read any peer-reviewed published articles on dog-inflicted wounds?
Yes.
Can you describe how many?
Oh, at least 20.
Have you ever attended any seminars regarding wound identification and bite wounds?
Yes.
How many approximately? Or if you can't recall, describe some of the seminars.
I don't know the exact number of seminars. However, I would frequently attend them at the coroner's office, Los Angeles coroner's office, and at the American Academy of Forensic Sciences annual meeting.
And some people have varying reviews about what happens in a seminar. What happened at these seminars that you attended?
These are high-level seminars, very intense. And I was one of the few medical physicians that would actually attend the odontology seminars because it was a special interest of mine.
And what were some of the topics at these seminars that were discussed on odontology? Sorry, first let's talk about what is odontology?
I think it's the study of human dentition, or dentition in general, I believe. I don't know.
And so it can be, it's the study of, back to the seminars. Describe what occurred at these seminars.
Yes, at the LA Coroner's Office, there would be a lecture every year about, I should say about every year, regarding forensic odontology and bite wounds, bite wounds on humans. At the American Academy of Forensic Science, those were very interesting seminars in which the specific cases were discussed by the board-certified forensic odontologists, and principles of bite marks identification was discussed.
Did those seminars involve the topic of dog-inflicted wounds?
Not primarily.
Was there any discussion of dog-inflicted wounds at those seminars?
At some of the seminars, if dog-inflicted wounds were discussed, it was just in means of distinguishing, a human bite versus a dog bite.
You've mentioned Dr. Vale's name a couple of times. Did you ever work in any capacity with Dr. Vale?
Yes, he was the forensic odontologist for the Los Angeles County Coroner's Medical Examiner's Office.
Did you ever consult with or for him?
Yes.
Describe that.
Well, he had a case where there was, it was a dog bite case, and I don't know a lot of the details, but he called me up and wanted to discuss the case and specifically some features of dog bites and treatment.
And was he looking for information from you, or was he just reporting to you his views?
No, he was looking for information.
And what type of information did you provide generally?
I can't really say.
But it
so
was
long
the
ago.
topic, again, the topic was?
Dog bites.
Yep. Let's now move on to a different topic. Do you have experience providing treatment to individuals involved in motor vehicle accidents?
Many, many hundreds.
Describe the many, many hundreds of experiences you have involving motor vehicle accidents.
Well, it's difficult because there were so many. I worked at a level 1 trauma center, which was right next to some major roads and major freeways. So vehicle accidents were very commonplace. But the victims would range from mildly injured to comatose and dead. A wide range, a lot of injuries, bodily injuries, head injuries. Wide range of injuries, and Well, that's pretty much it. And I know what I was going to say. Some of those victims were actually hit by a car. They weren't just motor vehicle collisions. They were actually struck by a car.
That's what I wanted to get to. So before we get to the specific of what you just mentioned, struck by a car, you've described today a variety of your roles from an EMT, police officer, etc. For each one, could you just tell whether or not getting into details, whether or not you observed and treated a human involved in a motor vehicle accident?
As an EMT, yes, I did. As an emergency physician, yes, I did. As a forensic pathologist, no, I didn't treat anybody, but I certainly examined them and took very detailed notes and made some assessments.
So as a forensic pathologist, because I'm assuming, well, as a forensic pathologist, describe a little bit more about what you mean.
Well, as a forensic, I should have clarified a little bit better. As a forensic pathologist in the coroner's office, all of those victims were deceased. However, in my role as a consultant forensic pathologist, I would consult on cases for the courts, for various parties in the courts on motor vehicle injured patients.
Now let's go to the emergency room. Can you approximate how many patients involved in a motor vehicle accident that you treated?
I can't. There were so many.
Is it in the
Hundreds or
tens?
thousands.
I'm sorry, repeat that, please.
I'm sorry, hundreds or to thousands.
And how do you come to that estimate?
I just again, if on a very conservative way, if I just very conservatively said I worked 1,000 weeks during my career, even if I saw one motor vehicle accident patients per week, I'm at 1,000. But certainly I saw a lot more than that.
Let's move on to the topic of wound patterns. How do you assess the source of wounds, generally?
Well, I look at the skin, and I try to recognize if there is a pattern that I've seen before, a pattern that I am familiar with, and sometimes in the past I had to compare a pattern to an object, for instance. But yes, wound recognition and pattern recognition are major interests of mine.
Is wound pattern recognition a topic that is taught in medical school?
In residency, for sure.
And what is taught in residency about wound pattern recognition generally?
Well, in emergency medicine residency, it's taught to recognize patterns and locations of wounds because the physician has to be able to recognize things like child abuse and elder abuse and domestic violence, which oftentimes are associated with specific patterns of injuries.
Is wound pattern recognition considered a standard of care, you used that term earlier today, in the medical profession, in the emergency department? Is that something is wound pattern recognition an area that an emergency room physician is trained in?
Yes.
And how frequently, in your experience as an emergency room physician, do you exercise pattern wound recognition?
I can't tell.
Is it frequent or infrequent?
Oh, frequent.
Why is assessing the source of bite wounds, well, let me go backwards. Is assessing bite wounds important in the practice of medicine in the emergency department?
Is assessing the source of bite wounds?
Is it important?
Yes, it is very.
Why?
Well, because different types of bite wounds are treated differently.
Does the assessment affect the care and treatment that the patient is going to receive?
Yes.
How?
Okay. Well, so certain bite wounds are prone to certain infections. So dog wounds are prone to certain infections, cat wounds, various other animals that inflict wounds cause infections. And the infections can differ from the inflicting animal. Additionally, so there are bacterial infections. There are also viral infections, such as rabies. So for instance, some types of wounds, wounds from some type of animals will require a series of rabies shots because those animals are known to harbor rabies. So it's very important to try to figure out what the source of the wound is so you can determine, does the person just need some antibiotics and a tetanus shot, or do they need a series of rabies shots?
Are there circumstances in which you've had to identify the source of wounds without input from the patient?
Yes.
Describe those.
Well, there may be a language barrier, or sometimes with a child will have a bite, but we don't know what bit the child. So yes.
Are there any other circumstances, any other categories that you have to determine the source of the wound, say where you might have a legal responsibility to make a judgment on the source of the wound?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
In terms of circumstances where you have to determine the source of the wound, are there any other examples where you've determined the source of the wound, sort of categories of people, certain types of victims that you've seen and had to make an assessment?
Are you talking about bite wounds?
No, just a wound in general.
Well, yeah, so...
Wound pattern is the topic, so
Yes.
with regard to wound patterns.
Okay. Well, yes. So it's important for an emergency physician, for instance, to recognize patterns because sometimes the victims themselves will attempt to mislead the doctor. For instance, it's not uncommon for parents or I should say caretakers or domestic violence victims to give a different story in the emergency department than the true story of how an injury was sustained. And I'm a mandated reporter. Emergency physicians are mandated reporters, so we have to be on the lookout for certain injury patterns.
Are you familiar with the term posterior surface?
Yes.
And specifically with regard to a limb, upper body limb and arm, what is the posterior surface?
So the posterior surface is the back of the individual. And
Hold up your arm and demonstrate what you mean when you say posterior.
But first, let me just explain that the anatomic labels are given to the human body, or have been given in the past to the human body, in reference to what they call the standard anatomical position, which is with the person standing upright and their arms down at their side. So anything in the front is called anterior, anything in the back is called posterior, which means that the posterior of the arm is actually here, because even though it doesn't look like it might be a posterior to somebody, it's actually anatomically the posterior of the arm. So it's this surface right here. And so that's what is meant by the posterior of the arm.
What can, and have you observed wounds on the posterior surface of an arm in your career?
Oh, that's highly indicative of defense wounds.
What do you mean it's highly indicative of defense wounds?
Well, we're taught in both emergency medicine and forensic pathology that if there are wounds to that area of the arm, it may be because the person or victim sustaining the injuries was trying to protect themselves, and so they brought the arm up to protect their face, their head, their neck, chest area. So the wounds to this area, the posterior of the arm, are often defensive wounds.
What is your experience with defensive wounds to the posterior location of the arm?
I have a lot of experience with them.
Describe that.
Well, both, again, in the emergency department, saw many victims, many patients, I should say, that had wounds to that area of the arm. And of course, in the medical examiner's office, again, saw many victims that had wounds to that posterior surface of the arm.
Did you, as part of that examination for the posterior surface of the arm, ever determine the wound was from a stab wound?
Yes,
How many times roughly?
10, roughly.
Did you ever in your career determine that a posterior wound was sourced by a dog bite or dog claw wound?
Not that I labeled in the medical chart as such.
In your analysis, in your experience in the emergency room and in the jail with canine wounds, did you reach a conclusion with regard to whether a wound on the posterior surface of an arm was a defensive wound as you have defined it today?
In the emergency department, it didn't really matter if an animal bite was on the posterior surface of the arm, because in the emergency department we focused in on treatment. It did matter in cases of, like I said, domestic violence or child abuse, because those were assaults. But other than that, the wounds were treated as if they were on the front of the arm. No difference.
How about in the canine dog bite wound experience? Did you ever conclude that a wound from a canine bite or any kind of dog bite was a defensive wound?
Yes, some of them were, but again, it didn't matter in terms of the treatment, so so that determination wasn't really important.
So you made a determination that they were, well, put it this way, did you make any kind of an assessment, whether it affected treatment or not, that the wound was a defensive wound with regard to a dog bite?
Yes.
Now let's go on to characteristics of dog bites and scratch wounds. Do you know approximately how many dog bite wounds present to the emergency room in the United States on an annual basis?
Yes, it's over 300,000 estimated.
And how do you know that estimate?
From the medical literature.
And is that medical literature you have read and are aware of?
Yes.
Which medical specialty, do you know what I mean by medical specialty?
Yes.
Which medical specialty sees the most dog bite inflicted wounds?
Well, I believe it's the emergency physician because we're the gatekeepers, so to speak.
Do you have a conclusion whether emergency room physicians have more exposure to and familiarity with dog bites than other specialists?
Objection.
Ask it differently.
Thank you. Do ER physicians have more exposure to and familiarity with dog bites than others?
Objection. Same objection.
Yeah, sustain for the same reason, but I'll give you a minute to think about how to ask it.
Thank you. Which medical specialty has the most exposure? Well, let me conclude it this way. In terms of the presentation of dog bite wounds in the emergency room, are emergency room physicians trained to recognize and treat dog-inflicted wounds on humans?
Yes, it's a common presentation in the emergency department.
Describe the difference between, well, do you know the difference between a civilian dog bite and a canine dog bite?
I believe I do.
Describe it.
Well, the canine dog bites inflicted by trained canine dogs tend to be quite devastating. Puncture wounds with tearing lacerations, very big wounds causing injury to muscle, connective tissue underneath, even blood vessels at times. They oftentimes require admission to the hospital and extensive intravenous antibiotics. As opposed to the canine, the civilian, what I call the civilian dog bites, which typically are just scratches or, I shouldn't say scratches, abrasions or small puncture wounds, and require maybe a little bit of irrigation and a tetanus shot and outpatient treatment.
Dr. Russell, you've been gracious and patient with my questions. Do you need a break for any reason, and subject to the court's permission?
So I was going to go just a little bit further, if we could, like 15 minutes. But I can't see Dr. Russell from where I am. Dr. Russell,
I'm
can you
okay.
break?
I'm okay.
Can you go 15 more minutes?
I could.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Let's move on to the topic of dental features of dogs. Do you have knowledge of the dental features of dogs?
Yes.
Describe that knowledge.
Well, I have knowledge of the numbers and configuration of the teeth, the shape of the jaw.
And can you describe generally that knowledge?
Generally, yes. So the shape varies depending on the breed, but generally there are 42 teeth in the canine mouth, and a certain number on the top, a certain a certain number down below, 20 on top, 22 below.
And does that knowledge source from your medical education training, or does it source from the literature, or both?
Both.
Now let's go to an overview of dog-inflicted injuries. Specifically, can you give an overview of the specific type of dog-inflicted injuries on humans?
Yes, they can range from the very minor, which are abrasions and contusions or bruises, to very large gaping lacerations and amputations and avulsions and just about everything in between.
What do you mean by an avulsion?
An avulsion is where a piece of tissue is actually torn away. By tissue, generally I mean the skin, and it's torn away from where it's supposed to be. But yet, a little part of it may still be intact. So it's not completely amputated, it's just a portion of it is torn away.
Are there ever teeth from a dog that are the cause of those types of injuries you just described?
Yes.
Are the nails of a dog ever the source of the type of injuries you just described?
The nails are sources of abrasions
are the claw marks the source of any type of injury from a dog? Or are the claw marks of a dog the source of any type of the injuries you just described?
Yes, abrasions.
Let's go to the types of dog bite injuries. Describe the types of dog bite injuries with which you have professional experience.
Well, I have experience with that whole range of injuries and the unfortunate situation of death, too.
So let's discuss the components of that range you just talked about. What types of injuries specifically from a dog do you have experience with regard to the type of dog injury from the dogs and the dog dentition?
I don't understand.
I'm sorry, my
the
question is not clear enough for you. Are there words or names that are associated with the type of injury from a dog?
Other than the medical terms like abrasions and contusions, lacerations.
Is there a certain action of dog teeth that occurs that they have a name for the type of injury that they present?
Okay, so one type of injury can be what they call the tear and the puncture and tear and pull injury, where the canine teeth, which are the longest ones, and the dogs have 2 canines on the upper jaw and 2 on the lower. The canine teeth actually puncture the wound, and what happens, and which I haven't described yet, is that generally a person's not standing still while they're getting bitten. They're pulling, the dog is pulling, and what happens is a lot of these wounds are caused, especially the extensive ones, by the relative pulling away of the victim and the dog. Some dogs hold on and pull as well. So this pulling, the puncturing and then pulling will cause these hole and tear lacerations.
Now, you've discussed previously wound pattern recognition. You've used that term. How would you describe the wound pattern characteristics of dog-inflicted wounds on humans?
There are a number of different patterns.
In a spectrum of characteristic, from small to medium to high, what one of those 3 categories would you describe is appropriate for the characteristicness of recognizing a pattern from a dog?
Well, if there is a certain combination of wounds, a certain pattern of wounds, being parallel lines and puncture wounds, etc., if that is present, that combination, that is highly characteristic of a dog-inflicted injury.
So I just want to make sure we understand the type of dog-inflicted wounds that are, as you just called it, highly characteristic of a dog wound. What is the observation that leads you to conclude in certain instances that a wound is highly characteristic of a dog-induced wound?
Well, if I see a combination of punctures or incomplete punctures, as well as parallel abrasions, so striations, scratches would be the civilian word for that, that combination is highly characteristic.
Are you familiar with the term, with regard to dog bites and dog wounds, an incomplete dental impression?
Yes.
What does that term mean?
Well, dogs don't generally bite with their entire mouth when they are biting a human. They bite with the front of their mouth. So you get a partial dental imprint. Additionally, depending on the type of, the amount of force and the grip, so to speak, that the dog gets on the skin, there may or may not be a complete impact of the teeth.
So would it be, so when it's not a complete impact of the teeth, have you observed that incomplete impact of the teeth in wounds to humans from dogs?
Yes.
Describe those observations, including how frequently you've made those observations.
In general, they're more frequent in civilian dog bites because the civilian, well, I can't say why, but anyways, they're more frequent in civilian dog bites, the incompletes. And the pattern is as I just described.
Is your experience greater from your entire career with dog-inflicted wounds from canine bites or from civilian dogs, as you've used that term?
In terms of overall numbers, civilians.
Your Honor, I would be going on to my next topic, and if you would like me to continue, I can, or if Your Honor prefers a break, I can do that as well.
Oh, I don't need a break, but I understand if people want a break. But what I want to know is how long, I'm not rushing you, but just to figure out how long we're going on the direct.
My best estimate, Your Honor, is 40 to 45 minutes.
Okay, so you say this is a good place to stop?
I do, Your Honor.
Okay, then we'll stop. So
Thank you,
we'll take
appreciate
a 20-minute break and be back out here at 11:30.
All right, please.
Oh,
Please, let's still in session. Quiet, please.
You are muted.
It's gonna be a bright, 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 sunshiny day. It's gonna be a bright, perfect
perfect song for this Thursday morning. Jason, the rain is gone, but you're going to be dodging a lot of downed limbs and tree branches and leaves this morning.
We have to break out our DeLorean so we can just fly above it. All right, friends, I last left you discussing the cold temperatures that we're going to likely have in the overnight. So let's talk about the upper level pattern, which is the jet stream pattern, which is a driving force for a lot of the activity that we have here in the lower 48, and it also dictates the temperatures as well. So one of the things that we are going to be dealing with here over the next couple days is going to have a notch of colder air develop. We're going to have a trough really sort of sinking a lot of that Arctic air down into our area by the time we get to the weekend and certainly by Sunday. And then milder air begins to develop, similar to what we experienced yesterday. However, I don't expect us to have the 60s return by Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. So the overnight lows beginning tonight through Saturday night, Friday night, and perhaps even early on Monday will likely go from the 30s back into the 20s and likely the teens as well. Now add on the winds, will likely feel like the upper single digits. So what's next in our weather forecast today? Busy winds are going to be developing, so we're roughly going to be around 20 to maybe 30 mile per hour gusts today. I think it's going to be mainly 20 to 25, so not as busy as what they were yesterday. But partial clearing is going to be happening in the skies, which is great news for us here. But those frigid overnight lows, I don't want those to catch you by surprise. So here's what the winds look like once we get past noon today. They begin to calm down overnight tonight and likely begin a little bit busier once we get to tomorrow morning. So likely going to be about 15 to 20 miles per hour. Where we are right now is likely where we're actually going to be throughout the course of the day today. We'll be around 40 degrees widespread across the board there. Some areas will be a little bit cooler and some areas will likely be a little bit warmer. But as you can see there, around 41, 42 degrees, that's about the best that we're going to do. I'm going to go back here and show you kind of what it was looking like here yesterday. 24 hours roughly where we were dealing with here really heavy rain, and some of it really caused a lot of issues there as well. Add on top of that, the winds from yesterday, the ground was soggy, the soil really allowed for some trees to start falling, and those hit the power lines. And even National Grid said yesterday in their morning press conference that they were expecting actually thousands of customers to be without power. So hopefully we can start getting a lot of that activity on out of here. Still, heavy coat is going to be necessary again for us this morning. Current temperatures mid to upper 30s, around 37 degrees south in Plymouth. Plymouth got over 3 inches of rain yesterday, so they can use dry several days. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday is going to be dry for us here by Monday and Tuesday. Look at that rain. Chances are going to be emerging again. Weekend is not bad. Sunny and chilly for us on Saturday. Sunday is going to be a little bit warmer, still with the sun and few clouds developing as well. This is the high pressure that will guide a lot of the sunshine today, tomorrow, Saturday, as well as Sunday. Then we look at this guy crawling across the Mississippi, moving through the Ohio River Valley. It'll likely cause a few flakes for us early on Monday, I think for the first half of the day, and then another area of low pressure will develop. It's going to get caught up in that one, and then it'll allow for more shower activity to develop. This is the reason why our Tuesday is going to be a little bit of a wet one. Here's the next 7. Okay, we have some dry days for us lying ahead today, tomorrow, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Monday and Tuesday, wet weather emerges back into the 50s for us on Tuesday, and then we're going to be dry again on Wednesday, Paula.
Jason, thanks. Oh, there's a new proposal to lower the amount of nicotine in cigarettes. The FDA wants to require tobacco companies to significantly reduce nicotine levels in traditional cigarettes in an effort to get more people to quit smoking. Now, the number of people who smoke has been declining for more than a decade, but according to the CDC, smoking is still the leading cause of preventable death and disease. Lawmakers are demanding accountability after an audit of our local postal service facilities found a number of serious problems. According to the Globe, auditors focused on the facilities in South Boston and Fort Point. They found pieces of mail on the workroom floors, packages that had not been properly scanned. More than 19,000 pieces of mail had been delayed. So Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley says those include paychecks, election mail, and medications for people. She questioned the Postmaster General at an oversight hearing yesterday.
You agree this is not an acceptable cadence of service. What grade would you give yourself?
I would give myself an A.
Okay, I vigorously disagree with that assessment.
Well, the Postmaster General says his staff will take a look into the South Boston and Fort Point facilities further In a statement, Senator Ed Markey also called for greater accountability and oversight of the United States Postal Service. Boston Dynamics, the robotics firm known for its dog-like Spot robots, has laid off 45 employees. According to the Globe, the Waltham-based company cut jobs in all of its departments, reducing its total workforce by about 5%. Well, 44 ducks that were impacted by Sunday's oil spill in the Muddy River are being treated in Barnstable. These ducks were brought to the Cape, where there are just more resources to help clean them. The process takes about an hour for each bird. They are washed twice with Dawn soap before taking a salt water bath. It's very important for their immune system. The cause of the leak is still under investigation. The New Hampshire SPCA is asking families to take home adoptable rodents this holiday season. Last month, one homeowner surrendered 800 of them, so now 250 mice and rats are up for adoption. The agency will host an adopt-a-thon this weekend and waive fees for adopters. For details on this event, just go to our website, wbz.com. Oprah, Gayle King, and Caitlin Clark will all be in Boston today to headline this year's Massachusetts Conference for Women. The nonprofit provides professional and personal development to women across the state. This annual event is marking its 20th anniversary. This year's theme, Power in Unity. About 10,000 women are expected to attend the sold-out conference. Well, the holiday season brings a lot of celebration and joy. It can also be triggering for people who are in recovery from alcohol or drug addiction. Experts say there are steps you can take to ease the pressure, not just for those in recovery, but for family and friends who want to be supportive. Liz Crawford of CBS News has more.
Jared Dotz has come to appreciate his regular walks, a time to meditate and reflect on how far he's come.
Me personally, I feel like I had multiple rock bottom situations.
Dotz said he spent a decade in and out of rehab for his drug and alcohol addictions. He said the birth of his son 3 years ago was his ultimate wake-up call. Now he says he's 2.5 years sober.
I just believed in myself for once and gave it a shot, and here I am.
Dotz says his recovery is a never-ending journey, and the holiday season can feel like an uphill battle. Everything from social gatherings to stress can be overwhelming.
Be around family and just try to show up now, it becomes a little difficult because not only are we trying to maintain our own recovery and our own sobriety, but we're just trying to learn how to live a normal life too.
Colleen Snow, the alcohol and drug director with the Camden County Health Department, encourages her staff to do extra check-ins and follow-ups this time of year.
Lots of stress that brings on triggers, and being triggered can easily lead to relapse.
Snow says mentally preparing for the holidays and setting realistic expectations can help people, no matter what stage of recovery.
To be open and really do some mindfulness and self-reflection to see where you're at and what you can really handle.
Loved ones can also help by being understanding and supportive.
I'm not taking this personal that they're leaving the party. It's not about me. It's about them and their safety.
If you feel too shaky to where it's I know I can't be around it, sometimes it's just don't go around it.
For Dotz, it's all about connecting with others in the recovery community and being self-aware in social situations. Liz Crawford, CBS News, West Berlin, New Jersey.
Coming up next, the local business working hard to bring a holiday classic taste right to your door.
You're watching WBZ News.
Christmas is less than 2 weeks away, and many of us look forward to those tastes we only have this time of year. Chris Tanaka takes us to a local dairy bar busy bringing one holiday tradition, eggnog, to your front door.
It happens here. Sharon. The town was founded in 1637 and, like many, has a strong revolutionary history. Heck, even 2 church bells in the town center were crafted by none other than Paul Revere. Today, Sharon is known for its good living, network of trail systems, and vast amount of open land. And a portion of that is at Crescent Ridge Dairy, a family-run business since 1932.
It's a long history. We think we have the recipe down pretty well.
Right now, they and every other producer are in the thick of it, crafting and bottling that rich, creamy eggnog.
This takes about 750 gallons.
750 gallons. But this is just for today's batch?
Yes.
Yeah, this isn't your run-of-the-mill home batch. You may crack 6 eggs in a 3-cup batch. This would be the equivalent of 70,000. Rob McCarthy says as they get closer to Christmas, they'll do 2 to 3 batches a day, or 6,000 to 9,000 bottles.
Last year, I think, was our highest, and we're pushing up to 40,000. This year, I think, it's going to be closer to 50, if not more.
It's an intense process to make something that's seemingly so simple. That nog is first mixed in the vat, then pasteurized or sterilized, homogenized or blended together, and then bottled.
That is a lot to go through for the 4 basic ingredients of eggnog. Milk, cream, sugar, and of course eggs, but still ready to be delivered to your front door.
It's been about 80 years that we've been bottling eggnog and making it here, bottling it, and delivering it.
That's generations of eggnog becoming as much a holiday tradition as the mistletoe and holly.
Really offering the customer not only the nostalgia, but the quality of the product.
Crescent Ridge delivers, sure, but also collects bottles for reuse, saying it's not only a green way of doing business, but it also actually helps curb cost. You can always pick up a bottle at your local grocery store as well. Chris Tanaka, WBZ News.
Still to come in our next half hour, a special delivery for a local hospital. The money being donated to make sure patients can celebrate the holidays.
It Happens Here is brought to you by Safety Insurance. We'll help you manage life's storms.
Right now on CBS News Boston, an embattled Boston City Councilor refusing to step down despite facing federal charges. What she told WBZ at this week's council meeting. Plus, a big announcement coming for President-elect Donald Trump. The major designation from Time magazine reportedly getting announced today. And there's a new lane for cyclists in Newton, but it's closed to bike traffic while part of a multi-million-dollar roadway remodel is being blocked off. City Councilor Tanya Fernandez-Anderson was back in the council chambers at City Hall yesterday for the first time since she was arrested on federal public corruption charges. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Paula Eben. City Councilor Anderson is pushing back on the calls for her to resign. WBZ's Beth Germano spoke with her to get Anderson's side of the story.
What do you say to your constituents?
I say that, onward with the people's work.
Embattled Boston City Councilor Tanya Fernandez-Anderson tried to do just that at the last meeting of the council this year, facing colleagues who have called for her resignation in the face of federal corruption charges and remaining defiant.
People have the right to their opinion. I think that they should afford, the privilege that everyone has to due process.
It was her first appearance in the chamber since her arrest last week, and determined it won't be her last.
The following projects are the programs that I've created and have been working on.
Taking to the floor to list a series of initiatives she has championed for District 7, she says, to address racial inequities. What she wouldn't answer is whether she is innocent of charges that she funneled an inflated bonus to a staffer and then pocketed $7,000 of that money.
Everyone knows that that is not something you comment on.
Do you owe your constituents an apology?
Same type of question. Same type of question. I cannot comment on that.
What do you say to the fellow councilors in that room today who are asking you to resign?
I'm asking for a respectful relationship moving forward. I am a professional and I'm going to be focused.
Among the councilors calling for her to step down is Ed Flynn, who today called for a hearing to create an ethics commission for the council, but without directly addressing Fernandez-Anderson.
Boston residents are looking for this body to provide honest and ethical leadership. Let's begin today.
God has brought me to this point to deal with a very, very, very difficult situation, and I have to come up to stuff.
Fernandez-Anderson says she has talked to councilors and the administration about not blocking her in any way from doing her work. She is due back in court in the new year. Outside Boston City Hall, I'm Beth Germano, WBZ News.
Let's get a check of the next weather forecast now with Jason Michael as we look at the Charles River. Jason, good morning. And thank goodness the rain has stopped, but the temperatures are going to start dropping.
Yeah, the temperatures are going to be responding with this cold pocket of air that we have outside amongst us right now. Thank goodness it doesn't look like it looked last night there in Beth's live report. This morning, though, we're expecting a lot of the dry weather and also the brisk winds to add some extra chill to the atmosphere. Around 60 degrees yesterday afternoon, could you believe it? But we also had a lot of that really sort of moist air mass that we're dealing with here, so a lot of the foggy conditions stuck around. Around 40 degrees outside as of right now, and I think we're actually going to have a lot of our temperatures today to really sort of hang out between the upper 30s and around 40 degrees. And look at this, as we head towards the afternoon, still expecting the upper 30s here. We have a lot of cold air outside amongst us, and actually we're below average as of right now across the vast majority of the lower 48. 3 degrees in Bismarck, negatives you can see there between Minneapolis as well as Chicago at the single digit of 5, 21 degrees right now in St. Louis, and mid-teens there in Omaha. Meanwhile, the Atlantic coast from the Carolinas northbound ranging anywhere between 33 and 39 degrees. It's going to be chilly for the start there of the school day for our kids. Heading home later on this afternoon, still expecting the mid to upper 30s, but also feeling like the lower 30s. Will be partly cloudy skies today. Again, west-northwest winds at 5 to 15. The rainfall yesterday certainly added a bit of help to the drought monitor. We get a new one today here, friends. But as we look towards the rest of the weekend heading into early next week, the winds will come down. They'll be out of the 50s and 40s from yesterday back into the 20s today. We'll talk about that long-term forecast just minutes away, Paula.
Yeah, even the kids will not fight getting bundled up as it gets colder. Jason, thanks. Well, the director of the FBI shocked Washington, announcing suddenly that he will resign when the Biden administration ends, years ahead of the end of his term. This comes after President-elect Donald Trump named his replacement, fierce ally Kash Patel, who met with senators in Washington yesterday. Jared Hill has more now from New York.
Serve until the end.
In a stunning announcement, FBI Director Christopher Wray says he'll step down next month before President-elect Donald Trump takes office, still with about 2 years left on his term.
This is not easy for me. I love this place, but my focus is and always has been on us and on doing what's right for the FBI.
Trump called his resignation, quote, a great day for America. The former president nominated Wray to the post in 2017.
Go ahead, Mr. Leslie.
Thank you, Your Honor. Welcome back, Dr. Russell. We've mentioned briefly the term differential diagnosis, and you have defined what that term means. In terms of assessing and treating dog-inflicted human wounds, do you invoke differential diagnosis?
Yes.
And could you describe how? How do you invoke the concept of differential diagnosis with respect to assessing and treating dog-inflicted human wounds?
With any wound that I see, and with any condition that I see in the emergency department, I usually get an impression, what I think it is, but it's important to think of what else it could be. So you don't focus in on your diagnosis right away or your first impression, because sometimes it's not accurate. And so it's very important to have what we call in medicine a differential diagnosis. This is what I think it is, but this is what it could be, and why isn't it this second thing or third thing?
Jimmy.
The host would like you to unmute your microphone. You can press star 6. You are unmuted.
Should I wait, Your Honor?
No, I think you're all set. All set, Mr. Clerk?
Yes, thank you. Sorry.
May I continue, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. How important or unimportant is the application of differential diagnosis with respect to pattern wound recognition regarding dog bites on humans?
It's important in a lot of conditions, including pattern wounds and dog bites, because you need to know, or at least I as a physician need to know what it is. What it is I'm going to be looking, what is it that I'm looking at, and what is it that I'm going to be treating? And I need to make sure that I'm not treating the wrong condition.
Let's now go to the topic of the materials you have considered in this matter. Without stating what it is, have you been able to form an opinion as to the source and nature of the wounds that were inflicted on the decedent?
Yes.
What materials did you consider in forming your opinion?
Well, I looked at the appearance of the wounds, and with my training and experience, I took that all into consideration. I did do a differential diagnosis on what those wounds could be. You know, could they be caused by an assault? Could they be caused by a motor vehicle? Could it be caused by, self-inflicted? I went through that whole differential before I came to my conclusion.
Did you look at any photographs of the decedent from Good Samaritan Hospital?
Yes.
Did you look at the autopsy report of the decedent?
Yes.
Did you look at the grand jury testimony of Dr. Scordi-Bello?
Yes.
Did you look at the trial testimony of Dr. Scordi-Bello?
Yes.
Did you look at autopsy photographs of the decedent?
Yes.
Did you look at the photographs that were taken by the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab?
Yes.
Did those photos include a sweatshirt or what's sometimes referred to a hoodie?
Yes.
And were there photos of that sweatshirt or hoodie that you looked at?
Yes.
Did you look at a letter from Tracy Kennedy with the town of Canton with a report regarding a German Shepherd owned by Brian Albert?
Yes.
Did you look at the photographs of dog bites and a certificate of vaccination for Brian Albert's former German Shepherd dog?
Yes.
Did you look at the forensic DNA testing report by the UC Davis Veterinary Genetics Laboratory?
Yes.
Did you look at the UC Davis Veterinary Genetic Laboratory case report?
Yes.
Did you look at a report from a Paul Mikowski, a licensed private investigator, on interviews regarding Brian Albert's German Shepherd dog?
Yes.
Do you have an opinion with regard to the nature and source of the wounds on Mr. O'Keefe's right arm?
Yes.
What is that opinion?
Those wounds were inflicted by a dog attack.
Do you hold that opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty?
Yes.
How did you form that opinion?
Well, I utilized my many years of training experience with wounds in general and dog bites in specific, and went over the materials quite a few times. And with that, and plus did read up on some literature that I had read in the past and reread again. And that's how I came to the opinion.
Now to get a little bit more specific, did you invoke your pattern recognition methodology in coming to that opinion?
Objection. You have to ask it differently.
Thank you, Your Honor. Did you employ a methodology in coming to that opinion?
Yes.
What was the methodology or one of the methodologies in coming to that opinion?
Well, right away, it was apparent that there was a pattern. So I used the pattern recognition methodology, plus my many years of training experience to come to this conclusion.
And with regard to the pattern recognition, do you have a level of certainty with regard to the pattern that you have recognized in the decedent's wounds on his right arm?
Yes.
What is that level of certainty or certitude?
Those wounds are highly characteristic of a dog attack.
How frequent in your experience do you find in wound care that a wound pattern is highly characteristic of a certain source?
I object to a percentage type question.
Can you answer that question, Doctor?
I'm not sure I even understand it.
So ask it differently,
Thank you.
please.
When you use the phrase highly characteristic, what do you mean by that phrase?
Well, it's very high. If I were to give a percentage,
please continue.
I would say almost almost pathognomonic, 90, very high 90s.
Now let's go to differential diagnosis. Did you perform a differential diagnosis in coming to your opinion?
Yes.
What other considerations did you take into account as to possible other causes of the injuries to the right arm of the decedent?
Well, given the pattern, there were certain things that came to mind right away that I had to rule out, and so I ruled out self-inflicted as an etiology. I don't think he self-inflicted those. The pattern was not characteristic of being struck by a motor vehicle. The pattern was not characteristic of those wounds in particular on the arm of being inflicted by another person.
You mentioned motor vehicle accident, and earlier in your testimony you spoke to your experience with observing and treating a lot of motor vehicle accidents. Why did you rule out motor vehicle accident as a potential cause of the injuries to Mr. O'Keefe's right arm?
Because he was found outdoors.
And what other reasons? Was there anything about the nature of what was presented in what you reviewed with regard to his injuries that caused you to rule out motor vehicle accident?
I think I misunderstood the previous question.
So, yeah.
Yes. So.
Let me start over.
Yes.
Because I am going to take what you said. So let me ask it this way. What caused you to rule out a motor vehicle accident as a cause of the injuries to Mr. O'Keefe's right arm?
There were several reasons I ruled it out very quickly. One is that the wounds were not characteristic of anything that I could attribute to a motor vehicle, a certain part of the motor vehicle, the underneath part of the motor vehicle. They were just not characteristic of any particular part of the motor vehicle. Secondly, there were no bruises from the neck down on his body. There was a mark on the hand, which I think I have an explanation for that.
Please.
Which was not a motor vehicle, but I didn't see any bruises or fractures or other blunt injuries that were characteristic of a person being struck by a motor vehicle. And if I could add to that?
Please.
We, at the coroner's office forensic pathology program, was specifically trained on how to recognize not only, if someone was struck by a vehicle, but to even recognize further about what types of vehicles would inflict, what types of wounds, and the locations that we should look for on the body for wounds for someone that's struck by a motor vehicle.
Have you ever taught, in all your career that you were discussing earlier today, how to assess whether an injury to a human has been caused by a motor vehicle?
Yes.
Describe how you taught that in your career.
Well, again, it's oftentimes a pattern. So, for instance, a wound on a certain part of the leg, certain number of inches up from the foot of the leg, could be the result of a bumper, for instance. So we were taught to look for certain patterns and locations of injuries. Also, injury from glass, has a certain pattern, automobile glass, and road rash has another pattern. So,
what are the features of glass from your experience with regard to motor vehicle accidents regarding injuries to humans?
Well, they often cause what we call dicing injuries, which are another pattern of injuries and lacerations.
Have you made that diagnosis that you just described as an emergency room physician?
Yes.
Have you made that diagnosis as a forensic pathologist?
Yes.
Describe how you've made that diagnosis as a forensic pathologist with a post-mortem individual.
Oh, again, it's pattern recognition.
One moment, please.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor. Do you need the question repeated?
No,
Please.
it's pattern recognition.
And can you give an approximation of how many years of experience you have had with that pattern recognition that you just described?
At least 30.
And how often in the 30 years, by year estimate, have you made that assessment?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe once every year or two.
So would it be correct 30 to 60 times? Let me rephrase it. How many times would you, based upon what you just said, estimate that you've made that assessment?
At least 15 times.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness with exhibits?
Sure, just show counsel what you're showing.
Counsel has all the
Just tell him
exhibits,
what
if I could just tell Mr.
Yes, you
Brennan?
can approach, just show it as you walk up.
Thank you.
Yes.
May I proceed?
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Russell, I have just handed you what is marked as Exhibit 2 in evidence. Do you recognize it?
Yes.
How do you recognize it?
I've seen it many times. It was part of the records that were provided to me, the photos.
Is that true and accurate?
This, yes.
Well, okay.
Of what I've seen, yes.
Right. So what I'd like to do is, Your Honor, may I publish that exhibit?
Yes, he said, ready to come up, Ms. Gilman? Or they're going to do it? Okay, sure.
No, I don't want 2, I want 4, please.
All right, so okay.
I just want to make sure we have, because Mr. Brennan.
Yeah, the numbers seem to be different. So Diane, I'm going
That's
to
it.
need from you the list of, all right, so what is
This is not, I'm sorry. Can I have a moment, Your Honor, to make sure, and I'll get it
Sure.
right in order?
My numbers are different, so I'm going to need to see the list of the exhibits so that I can remark what I have.
Right. So what I wanted to do is to go to 4. That's the one I wanted to go to.
Okay.
And
Are 4 and 2 the same?
no, they're different, Your Honor. And if I could I approach the sidebar, please, Your Honor, to get this?
Sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Brennan? So for purposes of an appellate record, we're now going to look at what's been marked as Exhibit 5?
That's correct, Your Honor.
Okay.
And I appreciate Mr. Brennan's cooperation in getting to this point. May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
Dr. Russell, do you recognize what is now depicted on the TV screen, which is marked as Exhibit 5?
Yes,
How do you recognize it?
because I see a very distinct pattern of wounds.
And have you reviewed this exact photograph before?
Yes.
You have mentioned the various types before of characteristics you've called highly characteristics of a dog wound and dog-inflicted wound. What I would like you to do, please, do you have a pointer?
I do.
Can you please test to make sure it works?
Yes. Okay. It works.
What I'd like you to do in your own words and with the court's permission, I would like you to use the pointer and go through with whatever method you believe is appropriate to describe each of those wounds and how you assess them.
Okay. Well, we will go from the shoulder area down to make it easy. So, first of all, the overall impression is there's numerous abrasions and that they have a pattern to them. One can see that many of them are parallel in nature.
Can you use the pointer? I'm not.
Yes.
Maybe,
So
yeah, I wasn't seeing it. Thank you.
okay. So for instance, the set of wounds closest to the shoulder up here, and these, by the way, are all on the posterior surface of the arm, posterior, and maybe this part is a little bit towards the medial, the lateral portion of the arm. But they all have so they're parallel. They're linear, meaning they look like a line, or they're not round, or these are at least are not round. And so these, do you want my interpretation, or do you want me to just describe?
I'd like you to stick with those, and then what I'd like you to do is you've described them, you said linear, etc. Have you completed your description of them before you get to how you reached a conclusion as to the source of that area you just did a circle around? Have you completed your description of them?
Yes, I've completed my description. How I came to the conclusion involves all of them.
Okay, so now let's then move, before you get to a conclusion, let's move to, in whatever manner you would like, the next wounds and how you assess those.
Okay. So, and by the way, on this first set, there's a very, very faint linear abrasion between these two prominent linear abrasions. Okay. Proceeding down the arm towards the elbow, we have another set of wounds, which consist of parallel abrasions. This time it looks like there's two in the more anterior portion of that lateral aspect of the arm, and then another linear abrasion down below here, as well as a superficial punctate or round tiny lesion.
What do you mean
it.
by punctate?
Punctate, I mean small and round. And there may be another punctate lesion right there. So that's this group. Proceeding down the arm, there is this irregular group here of multiple 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 linear abrasions at least, and then 2, possibly 3 punctate wounds below them. And this is right over the elbow area. And
WBZ News.
Dr.
Yes.
You mentioned irregular.
A police chase right in the middle on 93 during the morning commute. This is where that chase ended, on the expressway northbound by the gas tank exit. State police say the pursuit began near Dorchester Avenue over on 93 South. We don't know at this point why police were chasing this car or what the charges may be. 93 northbound was shut down for about 20 minutes, but it has since reopened. Also breaking, a tractor trailer rollover on an exit ramp in Peabody. This is on Route 128 near Centennial Drive. Right now, we don't know if anyone was hurt or how long that ramp will be closed. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brianna Pitts. Yesterday's storm moving out, leaving behind lots of damage, though. This storm delivered challenges for drivers. We do want to get a check of our next weather forecast soon, but before we do that, let's check out the flooding in the O'Neill Tunnel last night. Cars were driving through several inches of water on the ramp from Congress Street to 93 in Boston. Mass DOT say a pump actually failed here and debris clogged up a drain. So we will see some more gusty winds throughout the day today. WBZ meteorologist Jason Michael is here with a look at that next weather forecast. And yeah, Jason, we've seen some of those traffic cameras shaking from the wind.
Yeah, the winds are going to be busy again. That's at the top of my weather headline on this Thursday afternoon, everybody. However, I do want to point out it's nice to see the sunshine return after yesterday dealing with the fogginess as well as the heavy rains and also the high winds. We're actually getting a little bit of a reprieve, which is actually quite nice. Partly sunny skies outside right now, but again, dealing with a lot of the high wind gusts again today. Not quite as high as what we were dealing with yesterday, where we had more than 40+ mile-per-hour winds, but the winds will likely be ranging anywhere between 20 and 25 miles per hour for the rest of the afternoon. Sky conditions are likely clear even further as we get deeper into the afternoon and certainly by the evening and the overnight, allowing for some frigid overnight temperatures. So we're likely going to be back into the 20s and perhaps even the teens over the next 24 to 36 hours. But look at the overnight lows, again, right around the mid to upper 30s and around 40 degrees, which is actually where we're going to be returning to once we get into the later portion of the afternoon. 42 is going to be my forecast high for the city of Boston, so we'll likely warm up just another degree or so before settling back down and getting into the 20s and perhaps even maybe a few 30s overnight tonight as well. We'll talk about the weekend forecast as I'm already eyeing our next storm system, Brianna. Those details in that full forecast a little bit later.
All right, Jason, we will check back in. As for that storm cleanup, we saw some of the worst damage in Uxbridge, where a roof partially collapsed at a building. One person was hurt, and crews are now working to make that area safe. WBZ's Laura Hafley is on the scene.
There are a number of unanswered questions when it comes to what's next for this building. Will it remain empty? Will it be taken down? All questions neighbors are wondering after last night's collapse. Wednesday night, in the middle of pounding rain and relentless wind, a brick building in Uxbridge came crashing down.
They fell a good 20 feet or more.
8 people living inside got lucky, evacuated just moments before this facade broke through the roof below. Now bricks cover a closed down Menden Street. Orlando Corona calls Uxbridge home.
Well, this building has been here for a long time. It's sad that this has fallen down.
One resident was injured, taken to a local hospital. Fire officials blame the storm and the building's weak structure.
We believe it was water load on that roof.
An engineer will decide the future of the century-old building. In the meantime, Chief Thomas Dion snapping these photos from inside, standing on the first floor with a clear view through the roof to the sky above. The damage so severe, the town is concerned vibrations from nearby train tracks could further collapse the building.
When the train comes through, we'll just have it slow down.
Despite the uncertainty, neighbors are hoping the building they walk past every day can be saved.
I love these old, kind of plain-looking buildings because they have so much historical value to the town.
According to police officials, the one person with minor injuries is expected to be okay. As soon as we hear more from the engineer on what's next for this building, we will let you know. In Uxbridge, Laura Hafley, WBZ News.
Well, a witness from Karen Reed's first trial is testifying again today as the prosecution fights to keep her out of the second case. Dr. Marie Russell is a retired ER doctor and forensic pathologist. In the first trial, she testified that she had examined pictures of John O'Keefe's injuries and believed his arm injuries came from a dog attack, not from being hit by a car. The prosecution says the defense failed to prove that Russell has the right credentials. So the defense today is trying to clearly lay out her expertise.
Approximately how many dog bite wounds did you observe and treat in the emergency department at LAC-USC?
So the main emergency department?
Yes.
Well, over the course of all those years, at least 500.
Well, the attorneys are also expected to discuss when the next trial will be held. A judge has approved a delay until at least April. Well, President Biden is commuting the sentences of about 1,500 people and pardoning another 39. It is the largest single-day act of clemency in modern history. The commuted sentences are all for people who were released from prison and placed on home confinement during the pandemic. The pardons are for individuals who are convicted of nonviolent crimes, including drug offenses. Biden says he will continue to review petitions for clemency in the coming weeks. And Time magazine has named President-elect Donald Trump Person of the Year for the second time. The designation goes to the person that Time thinks had the most influence on global affairs. His first Person of the Year title was back in 2016. CBS News has learned that the suspect in the murder of the United Healthcare CEO is being held under maximum security in a Pennsylvania jail, but not in solitary confinement. As CBS's Lilia Luciano reports, police say there is now hard evidence connecting Luigi Mangione to the murder.
Shell casings found at the scene where United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson was killed matched the 3D printed ghost gun 26-year-old Luigi Mangione had in his possession when he was arrested, according to the NYPD Wednesday. Police also said the suspect's fingerprints matched the ones found on a water bottle and a wrapper found outside a Starbucks, where surveillance video appears to show he was before the killing. The NYPD said his print also matches one found on a cell phone that was recovered in an alley near the hotel. And at the time of his arrest, the NYPD says the suspect had a notebook where he wrote about his disdain for the healthcare industry. Law enforcement sources tell CBS News he wrote about using a bomb, but wrote that a shooting would be more targeted and would not risk innocent lives.
Are you seeing the statements about choosing a gun over a bomb that were allegedly made in this notebook as an admission?
I don't know that they have a confession, but I think they have enough facts, enough of a pattern of facts at this point to say, this shows he was going to do it. This shows how he was going to do it. These pictures show you that he did do it.
Sources tell CBS News Mangione's mother filed a missing persons report in San Francisco just days before the shooting. Friends say they hadn't heard from the suspect for several months.
I remember looking at his face like, that guy looks so familiar.
Dorian Wright says he taught the suspect several times at Power Yoga, Hawaii.
He mentioned to me when I was helping him with the pose, he said, I have a back injury. And I'm like, where's your back injury? And he said, lower back. The goal was he came to our studio to heal himself, and I don't have any bad memories of him.
Mangione's attorney says he plans to plead not guilty to all charges. And yesterday, the CEO of United Health, the parent company of United Healthcare, put out a letter to the staff of the company honoring Brian Thompson, the victim, and also stating at one point that the company vows to make healthcare better for everyone. Lilia Luciano, CBS News, Huntington, Pennsylvania.
Boston Mayor Michelle Wu is postponing her State of the City address by 2 months. The speech is usually delivered the first or the second week of January. However, the mayor is due with her third child on January 15th. She tells GBH Radio that delaying the address till March will give her some more time to recover. Well, the University of North Carolina will officially introduce Bill Belichick as its new head coach today. Belichick is 72 years old, and he will be the oldest coach at this level. He's also just 15 wins shy of Don Shula's all-time wins record in the NFL. Belichick released a statement saying, quote, "I am excited for the opportunity at UNC Chapel Hill. I grew up around college football with my dad and treasured those times. I've always wanted to coach in college, and now I look forward to building the football program in Chapel Hill." Well, coming up on WBZ News, an unusual rescue in Fall River. Why police pulled a man out of a chimney. Oh boy, and Jason is here. And Jason, we are looking at some colder temperatures, definitely a lot colder than yesterday.
Yeah, temperatures might take a tumble this evening into the overnight and certainly Friday night into Saturday night. Don't let it catch you by surprise. We have the 30s and 40s outside, at least for this afternoon. We'll talk about our changing forecasts and what lies ahead coming up.
You're watching WBZ News.
Well, check out this wild video. This is body camera footage from a home on Canal Street in Fall River. Police say they tried to serve a search warrant there on Tuesday, and a man, Robert Langlis, tried to get away by sliding down the chimney. He got stuck. Firefighters had to come help him get out. He is now facing several charges. The things that they see on the job, Jason. We saw a lot of stuff on the job yesterday. We had down limbs. We had crazy wind. A lot of damage for people.
A lot of damage. Our crews are probably out there still working today, especially trying to get a lot of the electricity that was lost courtesy of the storm yesterday now restored. This is actually a really great day to do that, and gladly that we have a lot of stability outside right now to allow for our crews to get outside and work. However, they're encountering a lot of cold outside as well. So weather's not going to be a major factor as far as exercising outdoors later on this evening or even commuting home. In terms of our temperatures, they're kind of all over the map a wee bit. So we have some temperatures noticeably colder from 24 hours ago, and even some areas up into the Merrimack Valley are just a little bit warmer from 24 hours ago. But again, it just all depends on what was happening 24 hours ago, where we had some heavy rain in some parts and a little bit of a dry spell in other areas. Our current temperatures are now, a little bit sort of seasonal. reasonable. We're in the mid to low 40s across several areas, south and also east of town. A little bit cooler up to the Lawrence area, around 39 degrees there as well. And look at some of the current wind gusts, okay? This is another side of the coin that we're talking about in terms of our weather headlines today. 20 to 25 plus mile per hour gusts. Our sunset later on this evening is going to be around 4:12. Sunrise time this morning was earlier around 7:04. And look at that. We're gaining daylight slowly but surely, closing out the month of December in a couple weeks or so. So let's talk about our hour-by-hour forecast for the rest of the evening. As you can see, temperatures will be scaling back into the upper 20s and low 30s. However, add on the winds and the impacts of what it will likely feel like on the skin, and we will struggle to make it out of the teens come tomorrow morning. It'll feel like the mid to upper teens along areas from Fitchburg over to the city of Boston around 9 a.m. Let's go forward a little bit. Mid-afternoon, still feeling like the mid to low 20s, and even some of the teens over in the Worcester Hills, and even 7 p.m. Not a whole lot of growth as well. So this is where we're likely going to be stuck over the next 24 to 36 hours with some of those frigid wind chills. Mainly clear overnight tonight, scaling back into the lower 20s. Another breezy night with the busy winds. So again, that's going to dictate what we're experiencing here. But it'll actually be stable through the weekend and into early next week with some of the frigid overnight temperatures. By Monday into Tuesday, our next system will begin to emerge. So this is what the setup is as of right now. This is what we're looking at. You can see where the activity from yesterday is now pushed well off to the east. We have another cold front that'll likely swing on in, sort of encasing us in colder temperatures. But again, over the next 24 to 36, perhaps we will have a few clouds kind of dancing through the skies. We will be stable. Saturday and Sunday, it's not going to be a bad weekend for us here with temperatures in the mid to low 30s on Saturday and mid to upper 30s come Sunday as well. By Monday and Tuesday, we'll have a few clouds to develop as well. We'll get a few flakes kind of rolling off through the region, maybe a spot shower chance. Another really good dousing of some rain arrives for us on Tuesday, but I don't think it's going to be anything near what we were dealing with yesterday. Most of the activity moves on out, and we'll be back to some 40s in the daytime towards the end of the 7-day next Wednesday. Brianna?
All right, Jason, thank you. Well, parents in Gloucester may have to adjust their vacation plans as the school district adjusts the schedule to make up missed days due to the teachers' strike. Take a look here at the dates on your screen. Most of February break will now be wiped out, and 6 days are being added to the end of June. The last day of school is now June 26th. Schools are required to have at least 180 days of learning. Up next on the WBZ News, question everything, why part of a multi-million-dollar roadway remodel in Newton is being blocked off.
If you are looking for ultimate relaxation and muscle relief, you have to give the Reathlete Air C leg massager a try. This is a game changer. Athletes have been using air compression for years to help after the big game, and now you can use this from the comfort of your own home, watching your favorite shows, reading your favorite book, but it's going to combine this air compression and massage and heat to help alleviate pain, accelerate recovery, and really just help you fully relax at the end of a long day. This compression massage is going to help with inflammation. If you are somebody who has pain in your knees, they have these hot and cold packs that you can insert, easy to use and reusable. Throw it in the freezer or the microwave, depending what you want to do. But if it's knots in your muscles, if it's swollen veins, anything you are looking to alleviate, all you do is put these on, plug it in, and then you can fully customize from the palm of your hand with the remote control. I will say you may fall asleep because you could be fully relaxed, and there is a timer, so don't worry about that. But you don't have to use the full legs. You can just do it on your feet, on your calves, whatever works for you. Right now, we're offering 26% off on the Air C leg massager, so head to cbsdeals.com for this exclusive offer.
Well, we have done quite a few stories on bike lanes, but this one is different. In today's Question Everything, WBZ's David Wade meets up with a viewer who asked us about a new bike lane built by the state where swerving is just as important as pedaling.
We are here in Newton, Massachusetts on Needham Street.
When Ian Whiting saw a bike lane as awkward as a pair of bike shorts,
There's been some new interesting looking sidewalk bike lanes that they put in.
the avid cyclist decided to make a video. But very quickly, before I show it, let me set the scene. This is busy Needham Street off 128 on the Needham-Newton line. After 3 years, MassDOT is wrapping up a $22 million project to make the road wider and safer. Part of it was the installation of raised bike lanes. Okay, now that we're warmed up, let's roll Ian's video of the new bike lane. The soundtrack Ian chose is kind of perfect because this is just plain silly. Utility poles in the center of the freshly paved, freshly painted bike lane. This isn't great.
That is not good at all.
Big bright orange barrels blocking the poles and signs warning cyclists that the bike lane is closed. How many did you say you saw?
I would say anywhere between 12 and 20.
Actually, let's get a recount. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, and number 30. And there's 15 on the other side of the road. As we were shooting this story, one bike came down the bike lane doing the sidewalk slalom. The futility of dodging these poles of utility is what Ian wanted people to see in this video.
My wife saw it and said, why don't you send that to somebody? And so I said, well, let's send it to Question Everything.
Ian asked us what's going to happen to these poles and when. Well, it's a MassDOT project, so I started there. MassDOT told me it has done its work, saying the poles are owned by both Eversource and Verizon, and they are responsible for moving them. And the state has already urged them to get it done as soon as possible. It looks like they have the new poles right there. The new utility poles are there, just across the sidewalk. But all of the wires need to be moved. Electric, phone, cable, sometimes more. Eversource told me it has already transferred a, quote, substantial portion of the electric service to the new poles and is now waiting on all the other utilities that use the poles, which is a, quote, detailed and complex process. Verizon co-owns many of those poles with Eversource. Verizon told me it's not allowed to touch other companies' equipment, and once their equipment is removed, Verizon will promptly remove all poles that we maintain. And then it'll all be better. Well, actually, it'll all be better once the holes from the poles are filled in and the bike lane is then repaved.
Right, and how they patch it is going to be important.
And if it's not great, we know a guy with a bike and a camera who will certainly let us know.
Have a good day.
All right, well, if you have a question you'd like us to answer, send us an email to questioneverything@cbsboston.com. You're watching WBZ. We'll be right back. Coming up this weekend, a new primetime concert special with Dua Lipa on WBZ. The Grammy Award-winning artist will be performing songs from her latest album, Radical Optimism, along with many of her greatest hits. The show was filmed at Royal Albert Hall. You can watch it on WBZ Sunday night at 8:30 and streaming over on Paramount Plus. It looks really great. Thanks for joining us. If you're watching us on CBS News Boston, we are going to rejoin coverage of the Karen Reed hearing case there. Have a great afternoon, and we'll see you back here for the WBZ News at 5.
All right, go ahead, counsel.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Russell, in coming to your opinion, did you examine an autopsy report?
Yes.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
And I am approaching with Exhibit 3.
Okay.
The autopsy, report of autopsy. Yes, sir. May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. Do you recognize Exhibit 3?
Yes.
What is it?
This is a report of autopsy on Mr. John O'Keefe, medical examiner number 2022-1697.
Did you consider that medical examiner's analysis in Exhibit 3 informing your opinion?
Yes.
And how did you consider Exhibit 3 informing your opinion?
Well, there was a description of the abrasions of the forearm and arm.
I'm sorry, which forearm and arm?
I'm sorry, right. Right forearm and arm, yes.
And what about the autopsy report did you consider in that analysis of that part of the autopsy report?
Dr. Scortabelli's description of the wounds.
And what was Dr. Scortabelli's description of the wounds? And feel free to read from the autopsy report.
Okay. Do you want me to read the descriptions?
Whatever it is you considered with regard to the injuries to the right arm of the deceased.
Well, she described what basically I just described, although she had some measurements.
Your Honor, may we republish the correct photo that we had up on the screen so the doctor can refer to it in, thank you.
Yes.
It's going to be number 5.
Your Honor, may I publish Exhibit 5 photo?
Yes, Ms. Gilman's doing it, I believe.
Ms. Gilman, are you all set with what you, thank you. And thank you for putting that back up on the screen. May I proceed, Your Honor? Dr. Russell, in reading from the autopsy report, can you read it and then determine whether there's any relation to what is being discussed in the autopsy report to what is in that photo?
Well, the doctor
I think he was asking her what she based her opinion on the reference to the medical exam report, not to compare it by reading it. And so I have an objection to simply reading through it and trying to interpret what the ME thought rather.
So rephrase your question.
Sure. Thank you. Please read from the autopsy report the relevant portions related to Dr. Scortabelli's analysis of the right arm.
Again, I object. It's not the ME's opinion. It's whether she relied on the information and how so.
I'll repeat. Did you rely upon what is in the autopsy report to support your opinion as to the nature and source of the wounds in the right arm?
Yes.
What did you rely upon in that report to support your opinion with regard to the nature and source of the wounds?
The description of the wounds at autopsy.
And what was that? What is that description that you relied upon?
It says here, multiple abrasions from 2 to 3 millimeters and up to 7 centimeters.
What page are you on, Doctor?
I'm sorry, page 3.
Okay.
Under the area that says injuries.
Okay.
And then in the subsection that says extremities. It's the second bullet point there.
Okay.
Multiple abrasions from 2 to 3 millimeters and up to 7 centimeters on the posterior right arm and forearm.
Roughly how many autopsy reports have you authored in your career?
Authored?
Yes.
Over 500.
How many autopsy reports that you have not written have you reviewed?
At least 100.
What conclusions do you reach from that description that you just read with regard to whether that is a description or not of a pattern in the report?
I object.
So you ask it a little bit differently.
Dr. Russell, what do you conclude from reading that section of the autopsy report with regard to the nature of the wounds, the total wounds depicted on what's up on the screen?
Well, it substantiated my observation based on the pictures.
What is the observation first? And then second, how did it substantiate your observation?
I'm not sure I'm understanding the question.
Did you, make sure I understood your answer, did you state that that section of the report substantiated your conclusions as to the nature and source of the injuries?
It substantiated my observations.
And,
yes.
okay, what observations did it substantiate?
Well, there are, as the doctor wrote, multiple abrasions and in a certain measure between 2 and 3 millimeters up to 7 centimeters on the posterior right arm and forearm. That's exactly what I see there.
So, is it your judgment that Dr. Scordi-Bello made the same observations of these wounds as you did?
Multiple objections.
Yeah, the objection sustained.
With regard to well, we've covered what we needed to cover with regard to that aspect of the autopsy report. Was there anything else in the autopsy report that spoke to the nature or source of those wounds?
Not that comes to mind.
So, did the medical examiner, Dr. Scordi-Bello, in that report reach any conclusions about the nature and source of the wounds that are depicted on Exhibit 5?
Not in this report.
So, not in that report. Now we're going to now move on to the next topic. Did you consider DNA evidence in this case?
Yes.
How, if at all, did the DNA, well, what DNA evidence did you consider in this case pertinent to the injuries to the right arm of Mr. O'Keefe?
I considered the reports from the UC, University of California at Davis lab regarding the DNA evidence.
What training and experience do you have with regard to DNA evidence?
Not very much.
With regard to describe what your DNA experience is.
Well, I'm aware that you have to maintain continuity of evidence, so you have to sample the appropriate area. And then you have to maintain continuity of evidence until that evidence gets to the laboratory for analysis.
How do you have experience, training, or knowledge with regard to the topics you just testified to?
Well, several ways. One was that I took a course when I was a police officer in crime scene investigation, and that was stressed, continuity of evidence. Secondly, I was sent to a course as the rape officer, or the rape investigator, I should say, in the Malden Police Department. I was sent to a course in Brockton entitled Rape Investigation, and they stressed continuity of evidence that was obtained from victims. And then finally, of course, as a emergency doctor and forensic pathologist, I received additional training.
How, if at all, did well, let me ask you, did you review the UC Davis Veterinary Genetics DNA report in coming to your opinions and conclusions with regard to the wounds on the decedent's right arm?
I did.
And what conclusions did you reach?
The same conclusion.
And what is that?
That those injuries were inflicted by a dog.
Are you aware of the results of the DNA testing of the UC Davis facility?
Yes.
What are you aware of?
I'm aware that DNA was not found.
And?
Excuse me, let me clarify that. I'm aware that dog DNA was not found.
And does that conclusion in your opinion determine whether or not those wounds were caused by a dog?
No.
Why?
Because I don't know anything about how the specimen was sampled. First of all, none of the samplings came from the arm of Mr. O'Keefe itself.
What do you mean by sampling?
The samples, the swabs that were performed and sent to the laboratory, none of them came from the arm of the decedent. Secondly, I don't know anything about how the samples were actually obtained from the evidence and what the state of the evidence was, if they actually sampled the correct area. I don't know if there was any continuity of evidence. And then finally, any test can have a false negative result. So the absence of canine DNA does not mean that the canine DNA did not exist. It just means that they didn't capture it.
To your recollection, did the autopsy report of the medical examiner, Dr. Scorti-Bello, reach any conclusions with regard to dog DNA evidence?
The autopsy report, no.
Is there any mention whatsoever in the autopsy report about dog DNA testing or analysis?
No.
Do you have any information that the medical examiner assessed dog DNA at all in the autopsy report?
I didn't see anything like that.
Your Honor, may I approach Mr. Brennan? Yes.
Yes.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, I would like to start with publication, and I'm going to have several exhibits that I would request your permission to publish, and I would appreciate starting with the Commonwealth's Exhibit 8. And I want to make sure Your Honor is aligned with the exhibit book with the numbering, and I'll do that in any manner. If you want me to put 8 up, or you want me to come sidebar and show you what we have.
If these are all in order from the Commonwealth's photos, go ahead and put it up. And if you do know the number, let me know.
Number 8.
Okay.
And I believe Mr. Brennan and I are aligned on the numbering.
Okay.
This is what is 8.
Right. Okay.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
Do you recognize Exhibit 8 on the TV screen?
Yes,
How do you recognize it?
because I've seen it before.
And have you seen it before in your assessment of the nature and cause of the decedent?
No.
Well, how have you assessed Exhibit 8 before today?
Before today?
Well, have you assessed Exhibit 8 at all?
I've seen that picture.
Do you have an assessment as to what you observe in Exhibit 8? Do you have an observation about Exhibit 8?
Yes.
What is your observation?
They appear to be blue jeans. They appear to have certain stains labeled with a small ruler, and I don't know the nature of the stains.
Is there anything with regard to Exhibit 8 that you believe is pertinent to assessing whether or not any injury from Mr. O'Keefe was sourced from a dog attack?
I can't tell.
Can we go to Exhibit 9, please? And if we could just, I'm sorry, Ms. Guerrero, if we go back to 8. Is there anything in the autopsy report of the medical examiner of the Commonwealth that speaks to Exhibit 8 in terms of the assessment that the medical examiner made in the autopsy report?
I don't recall seeing anything in the autopsy report regarding that, but if you can direct me to a certain area, I can look at it.
That's fine. Okay. So, thank you, Ms. Good. We could go to Exhibit 9 with the court's permission?
Yes.
Thank you. Do you recognize Exhibit 9?
Yes.
How do you recognize it?
Well, I've seen that image many times.
And what is that image?
Well, it appears to be a hoodie, sweatshirt, hoodie-style sweatshirt. It's got multiple dark stains on the sweatshirt. There appears to be a large tear through the middle of it, which I believe was probably caused in the emergency room, because that's what.
Why do you believe it was probably caused in the emergency room?
Because I've made those kinds of cuts in clothing before, having to get access to a patient.
Right. So what is the purpose of
commonplace.
making a cut like that on a piece of clothing, given your understanding of the nature of the injuries to Mr. O'Keefe?
He was in a very emergent situation, and they needed to get access to his body right away.
Okay.
So that's why they didn't have time to undress him. They just did the fastest thing, which is cut the clothing.
Do you have any other observations with regard to Exhibit 9 pertinent to your analysis?
Yes, there are multiple areas, particularly in the right sleeve.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Your Honor, may she use the laser pointer?
Yes.
Thank you.
There are multiple areas, particularly in the right sleeve,
I don't think your laser has yet hit. There we go.
that are labeled with triangular white signs, which are pointing to individual holes in the sleeve. And there were 11 of them that I saw on the sleeve, and there are 2 others on the chest area.
Have you, in your experience, assessed changes to clothing in determining the nature and source of those types of changes to clothing?
Yes. So
describe how.
Oh, clothing is important sometimes to determine more information about how a wound was inflicted. So, for instance, it's used in determining gunshot wound, entry, exit, direction, etc. I've used it in stab wound cases where, again, determining where the stab wounds were and if they were offensive or defensive type wounds. So yes, and in this case, they have significance.
And what is the significance in this case?
Well, these wounds are primarily on the right arm, which corresponds to the injuries that were on the decedent, the right arm. And furthermore, most of those wounds, when you enlarge that photograph, are small puncture wounds, very small. And what's interesting about them, to me, is that in many of those wounds, the fibers, the clothing fibers, are actually headed out of the wound.
And what significance, if any, is it to you that the direction of the fibers are coming, as you described it, outside?
Well, it's very significant because, in training, we learned that we had to look at direction, for instance, of tissue and fibers to determine if a gunshot wound was an entry or an exit. Now, gunshot wounds, they only do one of those 2 things through the same hole. They either enter or exit. But in this case, we have fibers exiting the wound, which means that the offending object exited the wound. So the teeth exited the wound.
Objection.
Sustained.
You mentioned the word offending object. How did you, without stating what it is, did you eventually determine what was the, as you call it, offending object? Do you mean offending object what caused this change to the clothing? Is that what you mean when you say offending object?
Yes.
Okay. How did you assess what was the offending object that caused the change to the clothing as depicted in that right arm of the hoodie?
I object to the form of the question.
Sustained. Just ask it differently,
Okay.
please.
Did you have a methodology to determine the cause of those changes to the hoodie sweatshirt?
Yes.
What was that methodology that you deployed?
So I looked at the location of those holes. I looked at the location of the wounds on the decedent. And although they're not exactly in the same location because clothing moves, they are generally in the same location of the wounds on Mr. O'Keefe.
Okay, with that, we're going to recess. I know that this is taking longer than you anticipated. Do you have any idea how much longer? And I'm not rushing you, Mr. Alessi, just do you know how much longer you might be?
Your Honor, my best estimate is 30 minutes.
Okay. Mr. Brennan, do you have any idea how long you might be?
At least a few hours.
Jim?
Quiet, please. Still on the record, folks. Still on the record.
All right, I'll see you at 2 o'clock.
2 o'clock, Your Honor?
Yes.
Report, please.
What's official? Bill